The stagecoach door slammed shut, leaving Evelyn Hart alone in a cloud of dust at the Nebraska outpost. Her husband's family had cast her out, a childless widow with no value. She clutched her small bag, watching the coach disappear into the scorching horizon. That's when she saw them, a tall, weathered rancher and two children staring at her with curious eyes. "I need a bride," the man said bluntly, "and you need a family." Her answer would change everything. Follow this story to the end and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this tale has traveled. The Nebraska sun beat down mercilessly on the wooden platform of Fort McPherson's trading outpost, turning the air into something thick and suffocating. Evelyn Hart stood perfectly still, her black mourning dress absorbing every cruel ray of heat, watching the stagecoach that had carried her become a shrinking speck against the endless prairie. The wheels kicked up dust that hung in the air like a funeral shroud, and with each passing second, her last connection to civilization, to everything she'd known, vanished into the shimmering distance. She was 26 years old and completely alone in the world. Her fingers tightened around the worn handles of her carpet bag, knuckles white beneath the thin black gloves she wore despite the heat. Everything she owned was in that bag. 2 dresses, a Bible her mother had given her, a tintype photograph of Thomas taken 3 weeks before the fever claimed him, and the silver locket he'd given her on their wedding day. That was it. That was all that remained of Evelyn Marie Sutton Hart's life back in Boston. No, that wasn't quite true. She also carried the shame. The memory of her mother-in-law's cold voice still echoed in her ears. "You failed to give him a child. You have no place in this family now that Thomas is gone." Margaret Hart had delivered the words with surgical precision, standing in the doorway of the Boston townhouse that Evelyn had called home for 3 short years. "I've arranged passage for you to Nebraska. My cousin runs a boarding house in Omaha. She may have work for you, or she may not. Frankly, my dear, that's no longer my concern." The cousins in Omaha had taken one look at Evelyn, childless, penniless, branded with failure, and found excuses. "Times are hard. We're already full up. Perhaps try further west." Always further west, until she'd run out of money at this godforsaken outpost, 60 miles from nowhere. The station master, a grizzled man named Cooper with tobacco-stained teeth, had been blunt when she'd inquired about work. "Ain't nothing here for a lady like you, ma'am. This ain't Boston. This is the frontier. Women out here are wives or soiled doves, and you don't look like you'd last a day as either." That had been 2 days ago. Since then, she'd been sleeping in the station's waiting room, subsisting on the last of her dried bread and the station master's grudging charity, a tin cup of weak coffee each morning. But even that meager hospitality had limits. "Train comes through tomorrow," Cooper had told her that morning, avoiding her eyes. "You best be on it, heading back east or west. Don't matter which. But you can't stay here." East meant returning to Boston in disgrace, begging Margaret Hart for scraps. West meant, what? More rejection? More closed doors? Evelyn pressed a hand to her stomach, trying to quell the anxiety that had lived there like a stone since Thomas died. The sound of hoofbeats pulled her from her dark thoughts. Evelyn turned to see a wagon approaching from the north, pulled by 2 sturdy horses. Even from a distance, she could see it was well maintained, the wood oiled, the wheels true. A man sat in the driver's seat, tall and broad-shouldered, his face shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat. But it was the 2 children beside him that caught her attention. A girl, perhaps 9 or 10, sat ramrod straight, her blonde hair pulled back in a severe braid. A boy, younger, maybe 6, leaned against the man's side, thumb in his mouth despite his age. Both children wore clean but simple clothes, well made but worn from use. The wagon pulled up to the outpost's small mercantile, and the man set the brake with practiced efficiency. He climbed down. Lord, he was tall, easily over 6 feet, and turned to help the children. The girl jumped down on her own, shooting him a defiant look. The boy had to be lifted, and Evelyn noticed how gently the man's large hands wrapped around the child's small waist. "Stay close," the man said, his voice a deep rumble that carried across the dusty space between them. "Don't wander." "Yes, Papa," the girl said, though her tone suggested she had no intention of obeying. Evelyn tried not to stare, But there was something magnetic about the scene. A father and his children moving through their day with the practiced rhythm of a family. It created an ache in her chest so profound she had to look away, but not before the little boy noticed her. "Papa?" he said, tugging on the man's sleeve. "Who's that lady?" The man followed his son's pointing finger, and Evelyn found herself pinned by the most startling pair of gray eyes she'd ever seen. They were the color of storm clouds, sharp and assessing, set in a face weathered by sun and wind. He had to be in his early 30s, with dark hair that needed cutting and a jaw shadowed with stubble. There was something hard about him, something that spoke of losses and walls built high. Those gray eyes swept over her in one quick, comprehensive glance, taking in her morning dress, her small bag, the desperation she was trying so hard to hide. Then he looked away, dismissing her. "Nobody, James," he said. "Come on." The word struck Evelyn like a physical blow. Nobody. That's exactly what she was now. Nobody's wife, nobody's daughter-in-law, nobody's mother, just nobody. She watched them enter the mercantile. The little girl, what had he called her? Nora? Chattering about something while her father nodded absently. The boy kept looking back at Evelyn through the window, his thumb still in his mouth, until his father gently pulled him away from the glass. Cooper emerged from the station office, wiping his hands on a rag. "That's Colton Reeves," he said, following her gaze. "Owns the biggest spread in 3 counties, the CR Ranch. Brought it up from nothing after the war." "The children?" Evelyn asked, surprising herself by speaking. "His wife died bringing the boy into the world. Been near 6 years now." Cooper spat tobacco juice into the dust. "He's been looking for a housekeeper, I hear. Can't manage those young'uns and the ranch both, but he's particular. Turned down every woman in the territory." A housekeeper. The word whispered through Evelyn's mind like a prayer. It wasn't charity. It was work. Honest work. A purpose. "Do you think—" she began, then faltered. What was she thinking? A man who owned the biggest ranch in 3 counties wouldn't hire a broken-down widow with no references, no experience, nothing to offer but desperation. "Don't even think about it," Cooper said, reading her expression. "Reeves don't take kindly to strangers. Keeps to himself, keeps his business private. You'd be wasting your breath." But what breath did she have left to waste? What options remained? Evelyn squared her shoulders. She'd been raised a Sutton, one of Boston's oldest families, even if they'd fallen on hard times. She'd been taught manners, deportment, how to manage a household. Surely that counted for something, even out here in this wilderness. Before she could talk herself out of it, she picked up her carpet bag and walked toward the mercantile. The interior was dim after the bright sunlight, and it took her eyes a moment to adjust. The store smelled of leather, tobacco, and coffee. Masculine scents that reminded her painfully of Thomas. Colton Reeves stood at the counter, conducting business with the proprietor, while his children explored the narrow aisles. "Need 20 pounds of flour, 10 of sugar, and whatever dried beans you have in stock," Reeves was saying. "And coffee. Good coffee. Not that sawdust you tried to sell me last time." "That was quality Arbuckles, Mr. Reeves," the proprietor protested. "It was burned and bitter." Reeves's tone left no room for argument. "I'll take the Morrison brand, or nothing." The little boy had found a jar of peppermint sticks and was staring at them with naked longing. Evelyn watched as he reached out one small hand, then pulled it back, glancing toward his father. "James, no sweets before supper," the girl, Nora, said sharply. "You know Papa's rules." The boy's face fell, and something in Evelyn's chest cracked open. She'd watched children like these on the streets of Boston, had imagined what it would be like to have her own, to comfort them and guide them and love them. That dream had died with Thomas. But these children were real, and they were right here. "Excuse me," she heard herself say. Colton Reeves turned, those storm cloud eyes settling on her with less warmth than the Nebraska winter. "Yes?" Now that she was close, she could see the lines around his eyes, the weariness that sat on his shoulders like a physical weight. This was a man who carried too much, who'd been carrying it alone for too long. "Mr. Reeves, I understand you might be in need of household help." His expression didn't change. "Where did you hear that?" The station master mentioned it. She had to force the words out past the lump in her throat. I'm looking for employment. I'm experienced in managing a household, and I'm good with children. It wasn't entirely a lie. She'd managed the Boston townhouse, had helped raise her younger cousins before her marriage, but she could see the skepticism in his eyes, the way they flicked over her expensive morning dress, her soft hands, her Boston accent. No, he said simply, and turned back to the proprietor. The rejection was so complete, so final, that for a moment Evelyn couldn't breathe. But she hadn't come this far, hadn't survived losing Thomas, being cast out by his family, traveling alone into this wilderness, to give up at the first no. Mr. Reeves, please, I'm willing to work hard. I learn quickly. I just need a chance. I said no. He didn't even look at her this time. I don't need help from some Eastern lady who'll faint at the first sight of honest work. Heat flooded Evelyn's cheeks, part embarrassment, part anger. Who was this man to judge her? To dismiss her without knowing anything about her? You don't know the first thing about me, she said, her voice shaking but steady. You don't know what I've survived, what I've endured. You look at my dress and hear my accent and assume I'm weak. But you're wrong. Now he looked at her, really looked at her, and something flickered in those gray eyes. Interest? Curiosity? She couldn't tell. But before he could respond, a crash echoed through the mercantile. Everyone turned to see James standing amid a pile of fallen tin cans, his face white with shock. The jar of peppermint sticks lay shattered at his feet, red and white candy scattered across the floor like broken dreams. James! Nora's voice was sharp with panic. Papa, I told him not to touch anything. The boy's eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I just wanted to see them closer. I didn't mean... It's all right, Evelyn said, moving before she could think. She knelt beside the boy, heedless of her dress in the debris. Accidents happen. You're not hurt, are you? James shook his head, but tears were streaming down his face now. Papa's going to be so mad. I'm always breaking things. I'm bad. No. Evelyn cupped his small face in her hands, her heart breaking at the self-loathing in his voice. This child, barely 6 years old, already believed he was fundamentally flawed. You're not bad. You're a little boy who made a mistake. That's all. But Hush now. She pulled him against her, letting him sob into her shoulder. Over his head, she was aware of Colton Reeves watching her, his expression unreadable. It's going to be fine. Your father will take care of it, and tomorrow this will just be a memory, nothing more. She felt the tension slowly drain from James's small body as she held him, rocking slightly the way she'd seen mothers do, the way her own mother had comforted her when she was small, before she grew too old for such displays. When James finally pulled back, wiping his nose on his sleeve, Evelyn smiled at him. Better? He nodded, then looked past her to where his father stood. Papa, I'm sorry. I'll work extra to pay for it. I promise. Colton's jaw was tight, but his voice was gentle when he spoke. I know you will, son. Go wait in the wagon. After James had trudged outside, his sister following with a superior expression, Colton turned to the proprietor. Add the cost of the damage to my bill. Already done, Mr. Reeves? Evelyn stood, brushing candy fragments from her skirt, and found Colton studying her with those penetrating gray eyes. You're good with him, he said finally. Children need gentleness, she replied, especially when they make mistakes. Is that how they do it in Boston? So he'd caught her accent. That's how my mother did it. I like to think she was right. Something shifted in his expression, some wall lowering just slightly. The work at my ranch isn't like managing a Boston townhouse. It's hard. The hours are long. The children are difficult. Hope sparked in Evelyn's chest, dangerous and bright. I'm not afraid of hard work. It's isolated, miles from town, from civilization, no fancy parties or social calls, just work, day after day. Mr. Reeves, I have nothing. No home, no family, nowhere to go. The stagecoach leaves tomorrow, and I don't have the money for a ticket east or the courage to go further west into nothing. If you're offering me work, I'll take it, whatever it is. He was quiet for a long moment, and she could see him weighing something in his mind, calculating risks against needs. I don't need a housekeeper, he said finally, and her heart sank. I need a wife. The words hung in the air between them, impossible and shocking. What? Evelyn breathed. My children need a mother. I need someone to manage the household, to bring some order to our lives. It's not... He paused, choosing his words carefully. It wouldn't be a real marriage. Not in the way you're thinking. Separate rooms, a business arrangement. You'd have a home, security, a purpose. I'd have help with the children and the house. That's all. Evelyn's mind reeled. Marriage. To this stranger. This hard, closed-off man she'd met 10 minutes ago. It was insane. It was impossible. It was the only option she had left. Why? She asked. Why me? You don't know anything about me. I know you're desperate, he said bluntly, which means you won't have romantic notions about this arrangement. And I saw how you handled James. He hasn't let anyone but me and Nora touch him since his mother died, but he let you hold him. That's not enough reason to marry someone. No, Colton agreed, but it's a start. Look, Mrs. Hart, Evelyn Hart. Mrs. Hart. I'm not offering you love or romance or any of those fairy tale endings. I'm offering you practical security in exchange for practical help. If that doesn't interest you, I understand. But the offer stands until I walk out that door. Evelyn looked past him, through the window to where the children waited in the wagon. James was leaning against his sister, his small face still tear-stained. Nora sat stiffly, staring at nothing, her expression far too old for her young face. Broken children, a broken man, a broken woman. Maybe they could build something from all these shattered pieces. I accept, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Colton nodded once, as if confirming a business transaction, which, she supposed, it was. We'll need to see Reverend Matthews. He's over in Plum Creek, about 3 hours' ride. Can you be ready to leave within the hour? I'm ready now. Then let's get this done. The ride to Plum Creek was the longest 3 hours of Evelyn's life. She sat in the back of the wagon on a pile of burlap sacks, her carpet bag clutched in her lap, while Colton drove and the children sat between them like a barrier. No one spoke. The only sounds were the creak of wheels, the clopping of hooves, and the endless whisper of prairie grass in the wind. Evelyn tried to process what she'd agreed to. Marriage. To a stranger. A marriage that wasn't really a marriage, just what had he called it? A business arrangement? She glanced at the back of Colton's head, at the breadth of his shoulders, and the capable way he handled the reins. What kind of man proposed marriage to a woman he'd just met? A desperate one, clearly. But desperate for what? Just help with the house? Or was there something else? And his children? James kept sneaking glances back at her, his expression a mixture of curiosity and wariness. Nora, on the other hand, stared straight ahead, her spine rigid with disapproval. This girl had been the woman of the house for 6 years. She wasn't going to welcome a replacement easily. What have I done? The thought circled endlessly through Evelyn's mind. What have I done? But what choice did she have? Return to Boston in Margaret Hart's cold charity? Ride west into nothing? At least this way she'd have a roof over her head, food to eat, a purpose, even if that purpose was serving as an unpaid housekeeper with a marriage certificate. The landscape rolled past, endless and unchanging. Nebraska in July was a study in browns and golds, the grass dried by the relentless sun, occasional cottonwoods marking the path of streams. It was beautiful in a harsh, unforgiving way, like the man driving the wagon. They stopped once to water the horses at a small creek. Colton helped the children down, then offered his hand to Evelyn. His grip was strong and calloused, the hand of a man who worked for his living. We'll be there within the hour, he said. Reverend Matthews is a good man. He won't ask too many questions. And if he does, then I'll answer them. Colton's expression was unreadable. This isn't my first unconventional decision, Mrs. Hart. I've survived worse than gossip. She wanted to ask what he meant, but James chose that moment to splash into the creek, soaking his boots and making Nora shriek in outrage. James Colton Reeves, the girl scolded. You know better. I was hot, the boy protested. You're always making messes. You're going to make Papa send you away like he sent Mama. Nora. Colton's voice cracked like a whip. That's enough. The girl's face went white. I'm sorry, Papa, I didn't mean. I know what you meant. His tone softened slightly. But that's not how it was, and you know it. Your mother didn't leave us. She died. There's a difference. Nora's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back furiously. Yes, Papa. Evelyn watched the exchange with a growing sense of understanding. This family wasn't just grieving. They were drowning in grief, in guilt, in all the complicated emotions that death leaves behind. And somehow, she was supposed to help them navigate those treacherous waters. How could she, when she was barely keeping her own head above water? The rest of the journey passed in tense silence. By the time they reached Plum Creek, a small collection of buildings that barely qualified as a town, the sun was starting its descent toward the western horizon. The church was a simple white structure with a steeple that pointed toward heaven like an accusation. Reverend Matthews was working in the garden beside it, a middle-aged man with kind eyes and dirt under his fingernails. Colton, he called, straightening with a wince. I wasn't expecting you today, and you've brought guests. We need you to perform a wedding, Reverend, Colton said without preamble. Today. Now, if possible. The Reverend's eyebrows climbed toward his hairline. A wedding? Colton, well, this is sudden. I'm aware of that. And the bride is... This is Mrs. Evelyn Hart. She's recently widowed and in need of a new start. I'm in need of help with my household. It's a practical arrangement, beneficial to both parties. Reverend Matthews looked from Colton to Evelyn, his expression both surprised and concerned. Mrs. Hart, are you entering this marriage of your own free will? Yes, Evelyn said, forcing her voice to remain steady. I am. And you understand the sacred nature of the vows you'll be taking? Did she? Could anyone truly understand marriage until they were in it? She'd loved Thomas, and look where that had gotten her. Maybe a practical arrangement was better, safer. I understand, Reverend. He studied her for another long moment, then sighed. Very well, but I want a few words with each of you privately first. Mrs. Hart, would you come with me? In his small office, surrounded by books and the musty smell of old paper, Reverend Matthews offered her a chair and took one across from her. You don't have to do this, you know, he said gently. If you're being coerced in any way, I'm not. Evelyn met his eyes steadily. Mr. Reeves has been nothing but honest about what this arrangement is. I'm alone in the world, Reverend. My husband died, his family cast me out, and I have nowhere to go. Mr. Reeves is offering me a home and security. That's more than most people in my position can hope for. And what about love? Companionship? The true partnership that marriage should be? She laughed, though it came out bitter. I had love, Reverend. I married for love. My husband was kind and good, and I thought we'd have a lifetime together. Then he got sick and died in 3 days, and his mother blamed me for not giving him children before he went. Love didn't protect me. It didn't save me. Maybe practical arrangements are more honest. The Reverend's expression was sad. Oh, child, you're so young to be so cynical. I'm 26, old enough to know that fairy tales don't come true. And Colton? What do you know about him? Very little, she admitted. But I know he's a father who cares about his children. I know he's honest, brutally so. And I know he's offering me a chance when no one else will. That's enough. Reverend Matthews was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly. All right. But Mrs. Hart, I want you to remember something. Marriage vows are sacred, whether they're spoken out of love or practicality. Once you make this commitment, you'll be bound to Colton and those children in the eyes of God. That's not something to take lightly. I'm not taking it lightly, Reverend. I'm taking it seriously. Maybe that's better. He stood and offered her his hand. Then let's prepare for a wedding. The ceremony was brief and businesslike, held in the church's small sanctuary with only the children as witnesses. Nora stood rigid and disapproving, while James watched with wide, confused eyes. Evelyn barely heard the words. She was too focused on the man beside her, on the weight of what they were doing. When Reverend Matthews asked if she took Colton to be her husband, her voice shook as she said, I do. Colton's voice was steady and sure when he made his vows. If he had any doubts, they didn't show. You may kiss the bride. Reverend Matthews said, and an awkward silence fell. Colton turned to Evelyn, and she saw the same uncertainty in his eyes that she felt. But he leaned down, he really was terribly tall, and pressed a brief, chaste kiss to her lips. It was over in a second, but it was enough to make it real. She was married, again, to a man she didn't know, didn't love, didn't understand. God help them both. As they signed the marriage certificate, James tugged on Evelyn's sleeve. "Are you our mama now?" he asked in a whisper. Evelyn looked down at his hopeful face and felt her heart crack. I don't know, James. We'll have to see." "Nora won't like it," he confided. "She says no one can replace our real mama." "Your sister is right," Evelyn said softly. "I'm not here to replace anyone. I'm just here." But as they rode away from the church into the gathering twilight, Evelyn wondered if just here would be enough for any of them. The real test was just beginning. The CR Ranch appeared on the horizon just as the last light was fading from the sky, and Evelyn's first thought was that it looked like a fortress against the wilderness. The main house was larger than she'd expected, a two-story structure built from rough-hewn logs and weathered timber with a wide porch that wrapped around the front. Outbuildings dotted the landscape. A massive barn, a bunkhouse, corrals, and storage sheds. Everything spoke of prosperity, hard-won and carefully maintained. "It's bigger than I imagined," she said, breaking the silence that had held since they left Plum Creek. "My father started it with 40 acres and a dream," Colton said, his voice carrying a note of pride. "By the time he died, we had 400. I've added another 600 since." 1,000 acres, Evelyn breathed. In Boston, such land holdings would make a man wealthy beyond measure. "Out here, it makes you a target," Colton said grimly. "There are men who'd like nothing better than to see me fail. Men who think they have better claims to this land, to the water rights, to everything I've built." Before she could ask what he meant, the wagon pulled up in front of the house. The door opened, spilling lamplight across the porch, and a woman emerged, tall, raw-boned, with gray-streaked hair pulled back in a severe bun. "About time," the woman called. "I was starting to think you'd decided to camp out there. Children need their beds, Colton Reeves. Not another one of your—" She stopped short, spotting Evelyn. "Who's this?" "Mrs. Brennan. This is my wife, Evelyn," Colton said, climbing down from the wagon. "Evelyn, this is Margaret Brennan. She's been cooking and cleaning here since my father's time." The woman's jaw dropped. "Your wife?" "Colton, what in the name of—" "We were married this evening by Reverend Matthews," Colton continued, his tone brooking no argument. "Mrs. Hart, Mrs. Reeves, will be taking over the household management. I'll still need your help in the kitchen if you're willing to stay on." Margaret Brennan looked like she'd been struck by lightning. Her eyes moved from Colton to Evelyn and back again, clearly trying to piece together how this had happened. "Married? You got married? Without telling anyone? To a complete stranger?" "That about sums it up," Colton said. He lifted James down from the wagon, then turned to help Evelyn. His hands on her waist were firm but impersonal, the touch of a man handling cargo. "Now, if you'll excuse us, it's been a long day. We'll talk more tomorrow." "Oh, we will definitely talk tomorrow," Margaret muttered, but she stepped aside to let them pass. The interior of the house was as solid and practical as its exterior. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a large stone fireplace dominating one wall. Furniture was sparse but well made, a table with 6 chairs, a pair of worn armchairs, a sideboard. Stairs led to the second floor, where Evelyn assumed the bedrooms were. Everything was clean but cluttered, with the particular kind of disorder that spoke of a household without a woman's organizing touch. Children's toys lay scattered across the floor. Dishes were stacked haphazardly on the sideboard. A basket of mending sat abandoned in one corner, overflowing with clothes that needed attention. "Nora, James, say goodnight to Mrs. Brennan and head upstairs," Colton said. "It's past your bedtime." "But Papa," James began. "Now." The boy's face fell, but he obeyed, trudging toward the stairs. Nora followed, but not before shooting Evelyn a look of pure hostility. Once the children were gone, Margaret rounded on Colton. "Have you lost your mind? You can't just marry the first woman you stumble across and bring her home like a stray cat." "I can and I did," Colton said. My reasons are my own, Margaret, but I'd appreciate it if you'd help Mrs. Reeves settle in. Show her where things are, how the household runs. And where exactly will she be settling in? Margaret asked pointedly. Because unless you've suddenly sprouted another bedroom, there's a question that needs answering. Colton's jaw tightened. She'll have Catherine's room. I've been sleeping in my office anyway. Nothing changes except we have help now. Real help. The mention of Catherine, his late wife, hung in the air like smoke. Margaret's expression softened slightly, though suspicion still lingered in her eyes. Fine, she said at last. But don't expect me to make sense of this madness for you. She turned to Evelyn. Come on then, I'll show you to your room. Evelyn followed her up the stairs, acutely aware of Colton's gaze on her back. The second floor had 4 doors, all closed. Margaret opened the first one on the right. This was Catherine's room, she said, her voice carefully neutral. Colton hasn't let anyone touch it since she died. You'll be the first. The room took Evelyn's breath away. It was beautiful in a way the rest of the house wasn't. Delicate lace curtains on the windows, a quilt in soft blues and greens on the bed, a vanity with a silver-backed brush and mirror set. But everything was covered in a fine layer of dust, and the air smelled stale and sad. What was she like? Evelyn asked softly. Margaret was quiet for a long moment. Catherine? She was fragile, like a hothouse flower trying to survive a prairie winter. Beautiful, gentle, completely unprepared for the life Colton gave her. She tried, I'll give her that, but this place broke her long before childbirth killed her. The words were harsh, but Evelyn heard the grief beneath them. Margaret had cared for Catherine, had watched her struggle and fail. Colton loved her? Evelyn asked. In his way. But love isn't always enough, is it? Margaret moved to the window, looking out over the darkened prairie. He met her in Kansas City, brought her back here thinking she'd adapt. She didn't. The isolation drove her mad. By the time James came, she was already gone in every way that mattered. The birth just made it official. Evelyn sank onto the edge of the bed, feeling the weight of Catherine's ghost settle around her shoulders. Why are you telling me this? Because you need to know what you've walked into, Margaret said bluntly. This isn't just a house that needs managing. It's a family that's been broken for 6 years. Those children have learned to survive without a mother. Colton's built walls so high even God couldn't scale them. And you, she studied Evelyn with sharp eyes. You're running from something. I can see it. Question is, are you running toward something better or just trading one kind of hell for another? Before Evelyn could answer, a small voice came from the doorway. Mrs. Brennan? I can't find my nightshirt. James stood there in his underthings, looking impossibly small and vulnerable. Margaret's expression immediately softened. It's probably in the wash, she said. Come on, let's find you another one. After they left, Evelyn sat alone in Catherine's room, her room now, and wondered what she'd gotten herself into. Through the floorboards, she could hear Colton moving around downstairs, his footsteps heavy and deliberate. Her husband, a man she didn't know, married to a memory she could never escape. She unpacked her carpet bag, hanging her 2 dresses in the wardrobe that still held Catherine's clothes. The juxtaposition was stark. Catherine's delicate silk gowns next to Evelyn's practical black bombazine. 2 different women, 2 different worlds, joined by the same man in the same desperate circumstances. Sleep was impossible. Evelyn lay in Catherine's bed, staring at Catherine's ceiling, and tried not to think about the future. But the questions came anyway, relentless and unanswerable. What did Colton expect from her? What did the children need? How could she possibly fill the void that Catherine had left? And underneath it all, the question she was most afraid to examine. What did she want from this arrangement? Morning came too early, announced by a rooster's crow and the sound of boots on the stairs. Evelyn dressed quickly in one of her morning dresses, then paused at the mirror. Should she still wear black? Thomas had been dead for 4 months, but Margaret Hart had insisted on a full year of mourning. Out here, though, did such rules still apply? She compromised by removing her black bonnet, leaving her dark hair pinned up but uncovered. A small rebellion, but it felt necessary. Downstairs, she found Colton already gone and Margaret cooking breakfast with brisk efficiency. The children sat at the table, James still half asleep, and Nora eyeing Evelyn with open suspicion. There's coffee on the stove, Margaret said without looking up. Colton's been up since dawn. He takes his breakfast with the men in the bunkhouse most days, leaves the house to the children. And me now, I suppose, Evelyn said. I suppose. Margaret cracked eggs into a pan with more force than necessary. You know how to cook, Mrs. Reeves? The name, her new name, sent a jolt through Evelyn. I can manage basic dishes. Nothing fancy. Fancy won't help you here. These men eat to survive, not to impress. Breakfast is bacon, eggs, and biscuits. Dinner is whatever can be made in quantity. Supper is leftovers. Can you handle that? I can try. Trying won't feed a household. Margaret pointed her spatula at the cupboards. Flour's in the bin, lard's in the crock, salt's in the jar with the blue stripe. You'll need to learn where everything is, and fast. I won't be here to hold your hand forever. The words stung, but Evelyn understood them for what they were. A test. Margaret was seeing if she'd break at the first sign of real work. Then teach me, Evelyn said. I'm a quick learner. Something flickered in Margaret's eyes, maybe approval, maybe just surprise. All right. First lesson, biscuits, pull up your sleeves. The next 2 hours were a crash course in frontier cooking. Evelyn learned that biscuits required a light touch, that bacon needed constant attention to avoid burning, that eggs could tell you everything about a chicken's health. Her hands, soft from months of grief and idleness, cramped and ached. Flour dusted her dress. Grease spattered her sleeves. But when she set a plate of slightly lopsided but edible biscuits on the table, both children stared in amazement. You made those? James asked. With Mrs. Brennan's help, Evelyn admitted. They look good, the boy said wonderingly, reaching for one. Then he hesitated, looking to his sister for permission. Nora's expression was cold. Our real mama made perfect biscuits, every time. The words were designed to hurt, and they hit their mark. But Evelyn had survived worse than a child's cruelty. Then she was a remarkable woman, she said evenly. I hope to learn enough to honor her memory. Nora blinked, clearly not expecting that response. She opened her mouth, closed it, then grabbed a biscuit and bit into it with more force than necessary. After breakfast, Margaret showed Evelyn the rest of the house. Upstairs were 4 bedrooms. The master bedroom that Colton no longer used, Catherine's room where Evelyn now slept, and 2 smaller rooms for the children. Downstairs was the main living area, a small office where Colton kept his ranch records, and a pantry stocked with supplies. You'll need to keep track of what's running low, Margaret said. Colton makes a supply run to town once a month. If you forget something, you'll have to wait. Out here, we can't just run to the corner store. I understand. Do you? Margaret turned to face her fully. Mrs. Reeves, this isn't Boston. This is the frontier. Winters here will freeze you solid. Summers will bake you dry. The nearest neighbor is 3 miles away. The nearest doctor is in Plum Creek, and he's drunk more often than sober. If something goes wrong, if someone gets hurt or sick, you'll have to handle it yourself. Then I'll learn how, Evelyn said. You keep saying that, learning, trying. Pretty words won't keep this household running. No, Evelyn agreed, but hard work will. And I'm not afraid of hard work, Mrs. Brennan. I'm only afraid of having no purpose. This, she gestured around the house, this gives me purpose. Margaret studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Maybe you'll survive after all. Now come on, laundry won't do itself. The work was endless and exhausting. By midday, Evelyn's back ached from hauling water. Her hands were raw from scrubbing, and her dress was soaked with sweat. But there was something satisfying about it, too. Every clean dish, every folded garment, every swept floor was proof that she was useful, needed. No longer nobody. She was hanging sheets on the line behind the house when she heard horses approaching. Shading her eyes against the sun, she saw 3 riders coming up the road, Colton and 2 men she didn't recognize. They dismounted near the barn, and Evelyn couldn't help but notice how the other men deferred to Colton, waiting for his lead. He said something she couldn't hear, and one of the men laughed. It was strange seeing him like this, relaxed, almost comfortable, so different from the tense, closed-off man she'd married. Then Colton turned and saw her. Even from this distance, she felt the weight of his gaze. He said something else to his men, then started walking toward her. Evelyn's heart began to pound. This was the first time they'd been alone since the wedding. What would he say? What did he expect? You're settling in, he said when he reached her. It wasn't quite a question. Mrs. Brennan is a thorough teacher. She's also blunt to the point of rudeness. If she's been giving you trouble, she hasn't. She's been honest. I appreciate that. Colton nodded, looking almost relieved. Good. I wanted to... We should talk about expectations. All right. He glanced back toward the barn where his men were watching with undisguised curiosity. Not here. Come walk with me. They walked in silence toward the creek that ran along the eastern edge of the property. The sound of water over stones was soothing, and some of the tension in Evelyn's shoulders eased. I know this wasn't what you planned for your life, Colton said finally. Marriage to a stranger, living on a ranch in the middle of nowhere. It's asking a lot. No more than you're giving, Evelyn pointed out. You're letting a stranger into your home, trusting her with your children. I don't trust easily, Mrs. Reeves, but I'm a good judge of character. I saw how you handled James yesterday. You were kind when you could have been dismissive, gentle when you could have been harsh. That told me what I needed to know. That I'm not cruel to children? Evelyn couldn't keep the bitterness from her voice. That's a low bar. You'd be surprised how many people fail to clear it. He picked up a smooth stone and sent it skipping across the creek. Catherine was kind too. Too kind, maybe. She couldn't bear to discipline the children, couldn't stand up for herself when my father criticized her. She just withered. Mrs. Brennan told me a little about her. Did she tell you Catherine was pregnant again when she died? That I'd begged her not to try for another child because I knew she was too weak? His voice was flat, emotionless. She wanted to give me a daughter. She thought Nora needed a sister. So she ignored the doctor's warnings, ignored my pleading, and got pregnant anyway. James killed her. Not deliberately, but he killed her all the same. Evelyn's throat tightened. You can't believe that. He was an innocent baby. I know that in my head, but Nora doesn't. She blames him. She's never said it outright, but I see it in how she treats him, like he's somehow guilty of murder. And you? Do you blame him? Colton was quiet for a long time. I blame myself. I should have stopped Catherine, should have been stronger, clearer. But I gave in because I couldn't stand to see her unhappy, and it cost her everything. The pain in his voice was raw and real, and Evelyn felt an unexpected surge of sympathy. This man who seemed so hard, so unbreakable, he was just as damaged as she was, just better at hiding it. Why are you telling me this? She asked softly. Because you need to understand what you're dealing with. Nora is angry and suspicious. James is desperate for affection, but terrified of getting close to anyone. And He trailed off, shaking his head. I'm not looking for love or companionship, Mrs. Reeves. I had that once, and it ended in tragedy. I'm looking for stability, for someone who can help me raise these children without expecting things I can't give. That's what you said yesterday, Evelyn reminded him. A business arrangement. I haven't forgotten. Good, as long as we're clear about what this is. Crystal clear, she said. But even as she spoke, she wondered if either of them truly believed it could be that simple. They walked back to the house in silence. At the porch steps, Colton paused. The bedroom situation, he said awkwardly. I want you to know I mean what I said. Separate rooms. I'll respect your privacy. Heat flooded Evelyn's cheeks. I appreciate that. And if you need anything at all, just ask. You're not a servant here. You're my wife. That means something, even if it's not traditional. Before she could respond, Nora appeared in the doorway. Papa, Mr. Calder is here. He says he needs to talk to you. Colton's expression immediately hardened. Calder. What does he want now? He didn't say, but he brought his foreman and 2 other men. They're waiting by the barn. Evelyn saw something dangerous flash in Colton's eyes. Stay in the house, he told her. Both of you, and lock the door. Colton, what? But he was already striding toward the barn, his hand resting on the revolver at his hip. Evelyn and Nora watched from the window as Colton approached 4 men on horseback. The man in front was perhaps 50, well-dressed in a way that spoke of money and power. He smiled when he saw Colton, but it was the smile of a predator. That's Silas Calder, Nora whispered. He owns the land north of ours. Papa says he wants our water rights. Water rights? The creek. It runs through our property before it reaches his. Papa has legal claim, but Mr. Calder keeps trying to challenge it. He says the water belongs to whoever needs it most. Evelyn watched as the two men talked. Even from this distance, she could see the tension in Colton's posture, the aggressive stance of Calder's men. This wasn't a friendly visit. Then Calder looked directly at the house, directly at the window where Evelyn stood. He said something to Colton, and even without hearing the words, Evelyn knew they were about her. Colton's response was swift and sharp. His hand moved to his gun, and Calder's men immediately tensed. For a horrible moment, Evelyn thought violence would erupt right there in the yard. But Calder just laughed, tipped his hat in a mocking salute toward the house, and turned his horse away. His men followed, and within minutes they were gone. Colton stood watching until they disappeared, then slowly walked back to the house. "You can unlock the door," he called. Evelyn did, and he stepped inside, his face dark with anger. "What did he want?" she asked. "To congratulate me on my marriage." The words dripped with sarcasm. "Word travels fast out here. He wanted to meet my new wife to see if you were real or just a convenient fiction." "A fiction? Why would he think that?" Colton's jaw clenched. "Because Calder's been trying to marry his daughter to me for 2 years. He thinks joining our properties would make him the most powerful landowner in 3 counties. My marriage ruins that plan." Understanding dawned. "So he'll challenge it. Try to prove it's not legitimate. He's already threatening to. Says a marriage performed so quickly to a complete stranger must be fraudulent. He's talking about bringing in the territorial judge, having it annulled. Can he do that? He can try. And if he succeeds..." Colton looked at her, his expression grim. "If he succeeds, you'll be homeless again, and I'll lose my strongest defense against his land grab." Evelyn felt cold despite the summer heat. "What do we do?" "We make this marriage look real, completely real. No one can suspect it's anything but a genuine union." He paused, then added, "Starting with you wearing this." He pulled something from his pocket, a simple gold band. Catherine's wedding ring. "I can't," Evelyn breathed. "That was hers. And now it's yours. Catherine would want her children protected. This helps protect them." He held out the ring. "Please." Slowly, Evelyn extended her left hand. Colton slid the ring onto her finger. It was slightly too large, but it stayed in place. "There," he said. "Now you look like a proper wife." But as she stared at the gold band catching the light, Evelyn wondered if looking like something and being something were the same thing at all. The days that followed fell into a pattern. Evelyn rose before dawn to help Margaret prepare breakfast. She cleaned, cooked, mended, and learned the 1,000 small tasks that kept a frontier household running. Her hands developed calluses, her muscles adapted to the constant labor, and slowly, so slowly, the house began to feel less like Catherine's domain and more like her own. The children were a different challenge. James warmed to her quickly, following her around like a puppy and asking endless questions. "Why is the sky blue? Where do chickens come from? Can you read to me? Will you play with me?" She tried to give him the attention he craved while not spoiling him too much. Nora was another matter entirely. The girl was polite but distant, performing her chores with mechanical efficiency and speaking to Evelyn only when necessary. At meals, she would talk to her father and brother, but she acted as if Evelyn were invisible. "Give her time," Margaret advised. "She's been the lady of this house for 6 years. You're threatening everything she knows." "I'm not trying to replace anyone," Evelyn protested. "Tell her that, though I doubt she'll believe you." One afternoon, about a week after her arrival, Evelyn was in the kitchen preserving berries when Nora stormed in from outside, her dress torn and muddy. "What happened?" Evelyn asked. "None of your business," Nora snapped. "Nora, you're hurt." There was a scrape on the girl's arm, bleeding slightly. "I said, it's none of your business. You're not my mother." The words echoed in the kitchen, sharp and cutting. Evelyn set down her wooden spoon carefully. "You're right," she said quietly. "I'm not your mother. I could never be your mother. She was special, and she loved you, and nothing I do will ever change that." Nora blinked, clearly surprised by the agreement. "But I am here," Evelyn continued, "and whether you like it or not, we're living in the same house. We can make that miserable for each other, or we can try to make it bearable. The choice is yours." "I didn't choose any of this," Nora said, but some of the heat had left her voice. Neither did I. Neither did your father. But here we are anyway. Evelyn picked up a clean cloth and dampened it. Now, will you let me clean that scrape, or would you rather it get infected and prove me incompetent? For a long moment, Nora didn't move. Then, slowly, she extended her arm. As Evelyn gently cleaned the wound, Nora said, I fell out of the oak tree by the creek. James dared me to climb it. That was foolish of him. He didn't think I'd do it, but I wanted to prove I could. And did you? I made it to the top branch. Then I slipped coming down. She winced as Evelyn dabbed at the scrape. Are you going to tell Papa? Should I? Nora considered this. He'll be angry. He told me not to climb that tree. Then maybe that's a consequence you need to face, Evelyn said. But I won't tell him if you give me your word you won't do it again. Not because he forbids it, but because it's dangerous and I'd rather not see you truly hurt. You'd rather not see me hurt? Nora's tone was skeptical. Believe it or not, yes. I don't need to be your mother to care whether you break your neck. Nora was quiet as Evelyn bandaged her arm. When it was done, she looked up at Evelyn with eyes that were too old and too wounded. She used to sit with me when I was scared, she said softly. Mama, when I had bad dreams, she'd stroke my hair and sing until I fell back asleep. Evelyn's throat tightened. That sounds lovely. I don't remember her voice anymore. I try, but I can't hear it. Tears welled in Nora's eyes. And now you're here, in her room, wearing her ring, and soon I won't remember anything about her at all. Oh, Nora. Evelyn knelt so they were eye to eye. That's not how memory works. Your mother is part of you. She's in your face, your laugh, your stubbornness. No one can erase that. But you're replacing her anyway. No, I'm just filling empty space. There's a difference. Nora studied her for a long moment, then pulled away. I need to change my dress before supper, she said, her voice carefully neutral again. But as she left the kitchen, she paused. Thank you for the bandage. It was a small victory, but Evelyn treasured it. That evening, as the family sat down to supper, Silas Calder returned. This time he brought his daughter, a pretty blonde girl of about 19 named Melissa, and a man he introduced as Judge Whitmore. I hope you don't mind the intrusion, Calder said, though his smile suggested he didn't care whether they minded or not. I thought it only neighborly to welcome your new bride properly. Colton's expression was stony. You've already met her, Calder. This isn't about neighborly courtesy. Now, can't a man be interested in his neighbor's sudden marriage, especially when that marriage seems so convenient? Judge Whitmore stepped forward. He was a thin man with sharp features and calculating eyes. Mr. Reeves, I've received some concerns about the legitimacy of your marriage. Given the speed with which it occurred and the circumstances surrounding it, I felt it prudent to investigate. Investigate? Colton's voice was dangerous. On what grounds? On the grounds that marriage fraud is a serious offense. If this union is merely a legal maneuver rather than a genuine marriage, it could be subject to annulment. Evelyn felt her stomach drop. This was it, the challenge Colton had predicted. Our marriage is perfectly legal, she said, surprised by the steadiness of her voice. We were married by Reverend Matthews in Plum Creek. We have a certificate. Oh, I don't doubt the paperwork exists, Calder said smoothly. But paper doesn't prove genuine affection or intent. It doesn't prove this is a real marriage rather than a business transaction. What exactly are you accusing us of? Colton demanded. Judge Whitmore pulled out a notebook. I'm not accusing anyone of anything yet, but I will need to ask some questions about how you met, why you married so quickly, what the nature of your relationship is. He looked at Evelyn. Mrs. Reeves, is it true you were destitute when you married Mr. Reeves? I was in difficult circumstances, yes. And Mr. Reeves offered you security in exchange for household help? He offered me a home and a family. I offered him the same. How romantic, Melissa Calder murmured, her tone dripping with false sweetness. Answer the question, Mrs. Reeves, the judge said. Did your husband offer you financial security in exchange for managing his household and caring for his children? It was a trap. If she said yes, it would sound like a business transaction. If she said no, it would be a lie. My husband and I, Evelyn said carefully, married because we believed we could build a life together. The specifics of our arrangement are between us. The specifics matter when determining legitimacy, Judge Whitmore countered. He turned to Colton. Mr. Reeves, do you share a bedroom with your wife? Nora gasped. James, who'd been watching with wide eyes, burst into tears. That, Colton said, his voice deadly quiet, is none of your damn business. Actually, it is. Consummation is a legal requirement for get out. Colton stood, his chair scraping loudly. Get out of my house, now. We're only trying to protect the integrity of the institution of marriage, Calder said, but he was smiling. Surely you can understand that. I understand you're using the law to harass me because I won't sell you my water rights, and I understand if you don't leave immediately, I'll remove you by force. Judge Whitmore snapped his notebook shut. Very well, but this investigation isn't over, Mr. Reeves. I'll be back with the proper authorities, and if I find evidence of fraud, there will be consequences. After they left, the house felt poisoned. James was still crying, Nora had gone pale, and Colton stood gripping the edge of the table so hard his knuckles were white. Papa? Nora's voice was small. They can't take Evelyn away, can they? The fact that she'd used Evelyn's name, the first time she'd done so, made Evelyn's eyes burn with tears. They're going to try, Colton said grimly. Then we have to stop them, Nora said fiercely. We have to prove the marriage is real, whatever it takes. She looked at Evelyn, and in that moment, something shifted between them. An alliance forged not from love, but from necessity, from survival. Whatever it takes, Evelyn agreed, but as she helped Margaret clean up from the ruined supper, she wondered what price that promise would demand. The following morning brought news that spread through the territory like wildfire. Silas Calder had convinced Judge Whitmore to schedule a formal hearing in 2 weeks' time. The entire community would be invited to witness the proceedings, and testimony would be taken to determine whether the Reeves marriage was legitimate or fraudulent. Margaret heard it first from the ranch hands who'd gotten it from a rider passing through. She delivered the news while Evelyn was kneading bread dough, her hands dusted with flour up to her elbows. 2 weeks, Margaret said grimly. Calder's making this into a spectacle. He wants everyone in 3 counties watching when he tears this family apart. Evelyn's hands stilled. Can he really do that? Force us to prove our marriage is real in front of the whole town? He's got the judge in his pocket, and the law on his side, or enough of it to make trouble. Margaret wiped her hands on her apron. Question is, what are you going to do about it? What can I do? You can fight, or you can run. Those are your choices. Evelyn looked down at the dough beneath her hands, at Catherine's wedding ring glinting on her finger. Running would be easier. She could leave before the hearing, spare herself the humiliation of having her desperate circumstances laid bare before strangers. Colton would survive the scandal. The children would recover. But where would she go? Back to the same hopeless situation that had brought her here in the first place. I'll fight, she said quietly. Then you'd better start acting like a real wife instead of a housekeeper, Margaret said bluntly. Because right now, anyone with eyes can see you and Colton are strangers playing house. That won't hold up under scrutiny. The truth of it stung. Evelyn and Colton barely spoke beyond practical matters. They moved around each other like polite ghosts, careful never to touch, never to let their guard down. It was exactly what they'd agreed to, a business arrangement, but it was also exactly what would condemn them. That evening, after the children were in bed, Evelyn knocked on the door of Colton's office. She heard papers rustling, then his voice calling for her to enter. He sat behind a desk covered in ledgers and documents, his sleeves rolled up and his hair disheveled from running his hands through it. The lamplight cast shadows across his face, making him look older and more worn than his years. Evelyn, he said, and she noticed it was the first time he'd used her given name. Is something wrong? We need to talk about the hearing. He leaned back in his chair with a sigh. I know. I've been thinking about nothing else. Margaret says we need to act more like a real married couple, that our current arrangement won't stand up to examination. Margaret's right. He gestured to the chair across from him. Sit down, please. She sat, folding her hands in her lap to keep them from trembling. What did Judge Whitmore mean about consummation being a legal requirement? Colton's jaw tightened. An unconsummated marriage can be annulled more easily than one that's been completed. It's one of the things they'll be looking for. Heat flooded Evelyn's face. I see. I'm not suggesting we actually... He stopped, clearly as uncomfortable as she was. But we need to make it appear that we have, that this is a genuine marriage in every sense. How do we do that without lying outright? We become more familiar with each other. We learn to act like people who chose to spend their lives together, not strangers forced together by circumstance. He studied her across the desk. Tell me about yourself, Evelyn. Your real self, not just the widow in mourning. The question caught her off guard. No one had asked about her in months, not her preferences, her thoughts, her dreams. She'd been reduced to a problem to be solved, a burden to be managed. What do you want to know? She asked. Everything. Where you grew up, what you loved, what you feared, what made you marry Thomas Hart. So she told him. About growing up in a Boston townhouse that grew shabbier each year as her father's investments failed. About loving books and music. About teaching herself to play the piano from a borrowed instruction manual. About meeting Thomas at a church social, how his kindness had seemed like salvation from her family's genteel poverty. He was good to me, she said softly. Not passionate or romantic, but steady, safe. I thought that would be enough. Was it? I don't know. We only had 3 years before the fever took him. 3 years of trying to be the wife his mother wanted, trying to give him a child, trying to prove I was worth the investment he'd made in marrying me. She twisted Catherine's ring on her finger. I failed at all of it. You didn't fail, Colton said firmly. You survived a loss that would have broken many people. You got yourself halfway across the country with nothing but determination. That's not failure. The compassion in his voice made her throat tight. Your turn. Tell me about Catherine. His expression shuddered immediately. What do you want to know? The truth, not the sanitized version for public consumption. Who was she really? Colton was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he stood and moved to the window, looking out into the darkness. She was beautiful, he said finally, delicate and refined, everything I thought I wanted after years of roughing it on the frontier. I met her in Kansas City when I was there selling cattle. She was at a hotel with her parents, and I was dazzled. She made me feel civilized again, human. Did you love her? I thought I did, but looking back, I think I loved the idea of her more than the reality. I wanted to believe I could have both, this ranch and a refined Eastern wife, that I could build something here without giving up the culture and sophistication I'd left behind. He turned to face Evelyn. I was wrong. This land demands everything. It doesn't leave room for divided loyalties. What happened when you brought her here? She tried. God, she tried so hard, but she hated everything about frontier life. The isolation drove her to despair. The work exhausted her. She missed her family, her friends, everything she'd given up to marry me. His voice grew rough. By the time she got pregnant with Nora, she was already broken. And I was so focused on building this ranch, on proving I could make it work, that I didn't see it until it was too late. You can't blame yourself for that. Can't I? I'm the one who brought her here. I'm the one who kept pushing for more land, more cattle, more success, while my wife was falling apart in this house. He looked at Evelyn with haunted eyes. When she got pregnant with James, the doctor told her another pregnancy could kill her. I begged her not to try, but she was desperate to give me a daughter, to somehow earn her place here. She died 3 days after James was born, and her last words were an apology. She apologized to me for dying. Evelyn's vision blurred with tears. Oh, Colton. So when I say I don't want a real marriage, when I say I can't offer you love or romance, that's why. I destroyed one woman with those promises. I won't do it again. She stood and crossed to him, acting on instinct rather than thought. I'm not Catherine. I'm not fragile or refined or expecting you to be something you're not. I know exactly what this place demands because I've already lost everything. There's nothing left to break. He looked down at her, and for the first time since she'd met him, she saw past the walls he'd built, saw the pain and guilt and fear he'd been carrying alone for 6 years. We can do this, she said softly. We can face Calder and the judge and whoever else questions us. Not because we have to pretend to be something we're not, but because we're already building something real. A partnership. A family. It might not be conventional, but it's ours. You sound so certain. I have to be. Because the alternative is going back to being nobody, and I can't do that again. Colton reached out and gently tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was so unexpected, so tender, that Evelyn's breath caught. You were never nobody, he said. You just hadn't found your place yet. The moment stretched between them, charged with something neither of them was ready to name. Then Colton stepped back, clearing his throat. We should practice, he said. If we're going to convince people we're genuinely married, we need to be comfortable with each other. Right now, we flinch every time we accidentally touch. He was right. What do you suggest? Small things. Sitting closer at meals, touching each other casually, a hand on the shoulder, that sort of thing. Using given names instead of formal address. He paused. And we should share at least some time together each day. Married couples talk to each other, confide in each other. We need to do the same. All right, we can start tomorrow. But as she left his office, Evelyn wondered if pretending to be close would make the distance between them more bearable or more painful. The next 2 weeks passed in a strange blur of domesticity and mounting tension. True to their agreement, Evelyn and Colton began spending their evenings together after the children went to bed. Sometimes they talked about practical matters, the ranch, the household, the children's needs. Other times they shared pieces of their pasts, building a foundation of understanding that felt more solid than mere familiarity. Evelyn learned that Colton had fought in the war, though he never spoke of what he'd seen, that his father had been a harsh man who believed affection made boys weak, that he taught himself to read using his mother's Bible and still carried it in his saddlebag, that he loved coffee so strong it could strip paint, and hated green beans with an irrational passion. Colton learned that Evelyn had once dreamed of being a teacher, that she could recite entire passages of Shakespeare from memory, that she was terrified of spiders but would happily catch and release snakes, that she hummed while she worked, usually old hymns her mother had taught her. They practiced casual touches until they became almost natural. Colton's hand on her back as he passed behind her chair, Evelyn's fingers brushing his as she handed him his coffee. Small intimacies that meant nothing and everything. The children noticed the change. James began sitting between them at meals, chattering happily to both his parents equally, and Nora slowly began to thaw. It happened one evening when Evelyn was mending one of Nora's dresses by lamplight. The girl came downstairs, supposedly to get water, but lingered in the doorway watching. Your stitches are very small, Nora observed. My mother taught me. She said if you're going to do something, do it well enough that it lasts. Mama's stitches were small too. Nora came closer, examining the work. But not as even as yours. It was the first time she'd compared Evelyn favorably to Catherine, and Evelyn's heart squeezed. Would you like to sit with me? Evelyn asked. I could teach you some of the more advanced techniques. Nora hesitated, then nodded. She pulled up a stool, and for the next hour, Evelyn taught her decorative stitching, their heads bent together over the fabric. Why did you really marry Papa? Nora asked suddenly. Evelyn considered lying, then decided the girl deserved honesty. Because I was alone and desperate, and he offered me a place to belong. Not the most romantic reason, I know. But you care about him now. I can see it. Did she? Evelyn thought about the way her pulse quickened when she heard Colton's footsteps, the way she found herself watching for his smile, the way his rare laughter warmed something in her chest she'd thought frozen. Yes, she admitted. I care about him, and about you and James. Even though we're difficult? Especially because you're difficult. Easy love isn't really love at all. It's just convenience. Nora was quiet, her needle moving through the fabric with careful precision. I don't want Mr. Calder to take you away. Even if you're not my real mama, I like having you here. Evelyn set down her mending and pulled Nora into a hug. The girl stiffened for a moment, then melted against her, and Evelyn felt tears on her shoulder. He won't take me away, she whispered fiercely. I promise. But as the day of the hearing approached, that promise felt increasingly hollow. Silas Calder had been busy during those 2 weeks. Evelyn heard from Margaret that he'd been spreading rumors throughout the territory. that she was a fortune hunter, that Colton had married her to spite Calder, that the whole thing was a sham to protect the ranch. By the time the hearing arrived, public opinion was thoroughly poisoned against them. The hearing was held in Plum Creek's town hall, and it seemed like every resident within 50 miles had come to witness it. The room was packed with curious onlookers, their faces ranging from sympathetic to hostile. Evelyn recognized some of Colton's ranch hands, standing in the back with their arms crossed. Margaret had come too, her expression fierce and protective. Judge Whitmore sat at a table in the front, looking important and severe. Silas Calder sat beside him with a satisfied smirk. Melissa Calder perched nearby, dressed in an impractically elegant gown that made Evelyn's simple blue dress look shabby. Colton stood when they entered, and Evelyn felt every eye in the room follow them as they made their way to their seats. He took her hand, his grip warm and steady, and she clung to it like a lifeline. "All rise for Judge Cornelius Whitmore," someone announced, though everyone was already standing. The judge banged his gavel. "Be seated. We're here to examine the legitimacy of the marriage between Colton Reeves and Evelyn Hart Reeves, contracted on July 3rd of this year. Mr. Calder has brought concerns about the authenticity of this union, and it's my duty to investigate those concerns thoroughly." He shuffled his papers with officious importance. "Mr. Calder, you may present your case." Silas Calder stood, and Evelyn felt her stomach drop. He looked like a man about to enjoy himself immensely. "Thank you, Your Honor. My concerns are simple. Colton Reeves and this woman," he gestured dismissively at Evelyn, "met on the same day they married. She was destitute. He needed household help. They concocted a marriage of convenience to serve their mutual interests with no genuine affection or intent to form a real marital union." "Those are serious accusations," Judge Whitmore said. "Do you have evidence?" "I do. First, I'd like to call Evelyn Reeves to testify." Evelyn's heart hammered as she stood and walked to the front of the room. Someone had set up a chair facing the audience, and she sat in it feeling like a prisoner in the dock. "Mrs. Reeves," Calder began, his tone dripping with false politeness, "is it true that you met your husband on July 3rd and married him the same day?" "Yes. And is it true that at the time you were homeless and penniless?" "I was between situations," Evelyn said carefully. "Between situations? How delicate. Let me be more direct. You were destitute and desperate, weren't you?" "I was in difficult circumstances. Circumstances that improved dramatically when you convinced Colton Reeves to marry you." Calder smiled. "Quite the fortuitous meeting, wasn't it? A wealthy rancher appears just when you need him most." "I didn't convince him of anything. He made the offer." "Ah, yes, the offer. He needed a housekeeper and you needed a home, so you struck a bargain. A business transaction dressed up as marriage." "It was more than that," Evelyn protested. "Was it? Tell me, Mrs. Reeves, did you love your husband when you married him?" The question landed like a blow. Evelyn's mouth went dry. If she said yes, it would be an obvious lie. If she said no, it would confirm everything Calder was alleging. "I barely knew him," she said finally, "but I believed we could build a life together." "How convenient. And where do you sleep, Mrs. Reeves?" Heat flooded her face. "I don't see how that's relevant." "It's entirely relevant. A genuine marriage includes intimate relations. So I ask again, where do you sleep?" "In the main bedroom," she said, which was technically true. She slept in Catherine's room, which had been the main bedroom. "And your husband, does he sleep there as well?" Evelyn's hands clenched in her lap. "Our sleeping arrangements are private." "Not when the legitimacy of your marriage is in question." Calder turned to the judge. "Your Honor, I submit that this is clearly a fraudulent marriage entered into for material gain and legal convenience. Mrs. Reeves was desperate for security, Mr. Reeves needed help with his household, and they concocted this arrangement to serve their purposes. It makes a mockery of the sacred institution of marriage." "I disagree." The voice came from the back of the room, and Evelyn turned to see Reverend Matthews standing. "May I speak, Your Honor?" Judge Whitmore looked annoyed but nodded. "Briefly," the Reverend made his way to the front. "I performed the marriage ceremony for Colton and Evelyn. Before I did so, I spoke privately with each of them to ensure they understood the commitment they were making. Mrs. Reeves was forthright about her circumstances, But she was also sincere in her desire to build a genuine life with Colton and his children. I saw no deception in her, only hope. Hope doesn't make a marriage legitimate, Calder snapped. No, but commitment does, and I believe both parties were committed to honoring their vows. Believing isn't knowing, Reverend. I call Colton Reeves to testify. Colton stood and took Evelyn's place in the chair. His expression was granite hard, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. Mr. Reeves, Calder began, why did you really marry this woman? Because I needed help with my children and my household. She needed a home. It was mutually beneficial. Evelyn's heart sank. He was being too honest, giving Calder exactly what he wanted. So you admit it was a business transaction? I admit it was practical, but that doesn't make it fraudulent. Did you love her when you married her? No. The word echoed through the silent room. Evelyn felt like she'd been struck. And do you love her now? Calder pressed. Colton was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was low but clear. Love is complicated, Mr. Calder. I respect my wife. I value her. She's brought order to my home and warmth to my children's lives. She's proven herself a dozen times over in ways that matter more than romantic declarations. So yes, I suppose I do love her, just not the way you seem to think I should. Something in Evelyn's chest cracked open. How touching, Calder said sarcastically. But respect and value aren't the same as genuine marital affection. Your Honor, I maintain that this marriage is a sham. I'd like to speak. The voice was small but determined. Nora stood in the audience, her face pale, but her chin raised defiantly. Young lady, this isn't, Judge Whitmore began. Please, Nora interrupted. I need to say something about my family. The judge looked to Colton, who nodded slowly. Let her speak. Nora walked to the front of the room, and Evelyn saw her hands trembling, but her voice was steady when she spoke. My name is Nora Catherine Reeves. I'm 10 years old, and Evelyn is my stepmother. She took a deep breath. When she first came to our house, I hated her. I hated that she was sleeping in my mama's room, wearing my mama's ring, trying to replace someone who couldn't be replaced. Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. But she never tried to replace Mama, Nora continued. She said my mama was special and she could never take her place. She just wanted to help. And she did help. She taught me things Mama never had time to teach me. She's patient with James when he has nightmares. She makes Papa smile again. Nora's voice broke. She makes us feel like a family instead of just people living in the same house. That's very sweet, Calder said condescendingly, but a child's feelings don't determine legal legitimacy. Maybe they should. James had come to stand beside his sister, his small face fierce. Evelyn's our mama now, not because she has to be, but because she wants to be. She doesn't yell when I break things. She helps me read. She tucks me in at night and makes sure the lamp's burning so I'm not scared of the dark. Children, Judge Whitmore said, his tone softer now. Your loyalty is admirable, but it's not just loyalty, Nora interrupted. It's the truth. Our family was broken before Evelyn came. Now it's starting to heal. If you take her away, you'll break us all over again. The room had gone completely silent. Evelyn looked at these two children defending her with such fierce determination, and her heart felt too large for her chest. Then she heard other voices joining in. I've known Colton Reeves for 15 years, one of the ranch hands called out. He's the most honest man I know. If he says his marriage is genuine, I believe him. Evelyn's been nothing but kind to everyone she meets, Margaret added. She works harder than any 3 women I know. That's not the behavior of a fraud. She helped my wife when she was sick, someone else said. Brought food and sat with her for hours. Didn't ask for anything in return. More voices rose, a chorus of support that seemed to catch Calder off guard. He'd expected the community to be swayed by his accusations, but instead they were rallying around the Reeves family. Judge Whitmore banged his gavel. Order! I need order! When the room quieted, he looked at Calder with narrowed eyes. Mr. Calder, do you have any actual evidence of fraud? Proof of deception or misrepresentation? The circumstances speak for themselves. Circumstances aren't evidence. I've heard testimony from the reverend who married them, from the children who live with them, and from community members who've observed their conduct. All of it suggests a genuine marital union, regardless of how it began. He turned to Colton and Evelyn. Mr. and Mrs. Reeves, would you both stand, please? They stood together, and Colton took her hand. I've been a judge for 20 years, Whitmore said. I've seen marriages of every kind, love matches that ended in hatred, arranged marriages that grew into genuine partnership, desperate unions that became something beautiful. The law requires that marriages be entered into freely and with intent to form a genuine union. Based on everything I've heard today, I believe that's exactly what you did. Evelyn's knees went weak with relief. Therefore, the judge continued, I find no evidence of fraud. This marriage is legitimate and will remain so. Mr. Calder, your petition is denied. The room erupted in applause and cheers. Calder's face went purple with rage. This isn't over, Reeves, he snarled. I'll find another way to get what's mine. The water rights were never yours, Colton said calmly, and neither is my family. Now get out. Calder stormed out, his daughter trailing behind him looking mortified. Judge Whitmore gathered his papers with a sigh. Mr. Reeves, Mrs. Reeves, I apologize for this ordeal, but I hope you understand I had to take the accusations seriously. We understand, Your Honor, Evelyn said. Thank you for being fair. After the judge left, the crowd began to disperse, many stopping to offer congratulations or express their support. Margaret hugged Evelyn so hard she could barely breathe. You did it, the older woman whispered. You fought for your family and you won. My family, Evelyn thought. When had they become truly hers? She looked around for the children and found them surrounded by well-wishers. Nora stood tall and proud, accepting compliments on her testimony with grace. James clung to one of the ranch hands, still wound up from the excitement. Then she felt Colton's hand on her shoulder, turning her to face him. What you said in there, she began, about valuing me, respecting me. I meant every word, he said. Evelyn, I know this started as a practical arrangement, but somewhere along the way, it became something more, at least for me. I can't promise you passionate romance or flowery declarations, but I can promise you honesty, partnership, and a family that needs you as much as you need them. Is that enough? She asked. For a real marriage? I think it might be more than enough. I think it might be everything that matters. He leaned down and kissed her, not the brief chaste kiss from their wedding day, but something deeper, something that tasted like promise and possibility and home. When they broke apart, Evelyn saw Nora watching them with a small, satisfied smile. Does this mean we don't have to call her Mrs. Reeves anymore? James asked loudly. Can we just call her Mama? Evelyn looked at Colton, her eyes asking permission. He nodded, his expression soft in a way she'd never seen before. Yes, she told James, her voice breaking with emotion. You can call me Mama if you want to. The boy launched himself at her, wrapping his small arms around her waist. Nora joined them more slowly, but when Evelyn reached out, the girl came willingly into the embrace. Colton's arms came around all three of them, and for the first time since she'd stepped off that stagecoach in Fort McPherson, Evelyn felt like she'd finally come home. They stood there in the emptying town hall, a family forged not from blood or romance, but from choice and commitment, and the stubborn refusal to let others define what they could be. Outside, the Nebraska sun was setting in a blaze of gold and crimson. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new work, new reasons to fight for what they'd built. But tonight, they had this moment of victory and belonging and love in all its complicated, imperfect, absolutely real forms. And it was more than enough. The ride home from Plum Creek felt different from any journey Evelyn had taken before. The same prairie stretched endlessly around them. The same wagon wheels creaked their familiar rhythm, but everything had changed. James sat pressed against her side, his head heavy on her shoulder as exhaustion from the day's drama finally claimed him. Nora sat on her other side, not quite touching, but close enough that Evelyn could feel the warmth of her presence. And Colton drove with one hand on the reins and the other resting near Evelyn's, close enough that their fingers brushed with every bump in the road. You were very brave today, Evelyn told Nora softly, careful not to wake James. What you said in front of all those people, that took real courage. I was terrified, Nora admitted. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what needs to be done despite being afraid. Nora was quiet for a moment, then said, I meant what I said. About you making us feel like a family again. She paused, struggling with something. I know I was awful to you at first. I'm sorry. You were protecting your mother's memory. There's nothing to apologize for. But I was mean. I wanted you to leave. I know, but you changed your mind, and that's what matters. Evelyn risked putting her arm around the girl's shoulders, and when Nora leaned into the embrace, her heart swelled. We're going to be all right, you know? All of us together. Mr. Calder looked so angry when he left, Nora said, and Evelyn heard the worry beneath her words. Do you think he'll really try something else? From the driver's seat, Colton spoke. Silas Calder doesn't give up easily, but he's lost this battle, and publicly. That matters out here. The community saw him try to destroy a family and fail. His influence just took a serious blow. So we're safe? Nora asked. Safer than we were, but we'll stay vigilant. He glanced back at them, his expression softening when he saw James sleeping against Evelyn. Right now, though, let's just focus on getting home. Home. The word resonated through Evelyn with a warmth that had nothing to do with the summer evening. The CR Ranch was home now, truly and completely. Not just a place she stayed, but a place she belonged. They arrived as twilight was painting the sky in shades of purple and deep blue. Margaret met them at the door, her face anxious until she saw their expressions. It went well, then? She asked. Better than well, Colton said, lifting James from the wagon. The boy stirred but didn't wake, simply transferring his trust from Evelyn to his father with the easy faith of childhood. The judge ruled in our favor. Calder was humiliated in front of half the territory. Good, Margaret said fiercely. That man's been needing taking down a peg for years. Come on, let's get these children to bed, and then you can tell me everything. Evelyn helped Nora upstairs while Colton carried James. As she tucked Nora into bed, the girl caught her hand. Will you stay? Just until I fall asleep? Of course. Evelyn sat on the edge of the bed, gently stroking Nora's hair the way the girl had said her mother used to do. In the lamplight, she could see Catherine in Nora's features, the delicate bone structure, the way her eyelashes cast shadows on her cheeks. But she could see Colton too, in the stubborn set of her jaw and the intelligence in her eyes. Evelyn? Nora's voice was drowsy. Are you and Papa really married now? I mean, truly married, not just pretending? What makes you ask that? The way he kissed you today, it looked real. Heat crept up Evelyn's neck. We're truly married, sweetheart. We have been since the day we spoke our vows. Today just made everyone else believe it. Good, Nora mumbled, her eyes drifting closed. I like having a mama again. The words wrapped around Evelyn's heart and squeezed. She stayed until Nora's breathing deepened into sleep, then carefully extinguished the lamp and slipped from the room. She found Colton in James's room, standing over the boy's bed with an expression of such tender protectiveness it made her breath catch. He looked up when she entered, and something passed between them in the dim light, an understanding, a recognition of the life they were building together. He was so scared today, Colton said quietly. When Calder was questioning you, James was crying. He thought they were going to take you away. But they didn't. No. Thanks in large part to him and Nora. He moved toward the door and they stepped into the hallway together. Those children have been through so much loss. I can't let them lose anyone else. You won't, Evelyn promised. I'm not going anywhere. They stood close in the narrow hallway, closer than they'd ever been except for that kiss in the town hall. Evelyn was acutely aware of the warmth radiating from Colton's body, the breadth of his shoulders blocking out the lamplight, the way his eyes searched her face, as if looking for answers to unasked questions. About what I said at the hearing, he began. About loving you. You said it to satisfy the judge, I understand. No. He cupped her face gently, his callous thumb brushing her cheekbone. I said it because it's true. I don't know when it happened or how, but somewhere between the stagecoach station and today, this stopped being an arrangement and became real. You became real to me. Evelyn's eyes burned with tears. You're real to me too. These past weeks, getting to know you, learning to be part of this family. It's been the happiest I've been since before Thomas died. Maybe even happier than that. I can't be the romantic hero you might have dreamed of, Colton said, his voice rough. I'm just a rancher with too much responsibility and not enough poetry in my soul. I don't want poetry. I want honesty, partnership, exactly what you've already given me. She covered his hand with hers, holding it against her cheek. This, us, it's better than any fairy tale because it's real and earned and ours. He kissed her then, slow and deep and full of promise. Not the public display from earlier, but something private and precious. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Colton rested his forehead against hers. I should ask you properly, he murmured. The way I should have done from the start. Evelyn Hart Reeves, will you stay married to me? Will you build this life with me and these children, for better or worse, until death parts us? I already promised that once, in front of Reverend Matthews, she reminded him, smiling through her tears. I know, but I want you to promise again, now that you know what you're getting into. Now that it's a real choice, not desperation. Then yes, she said. Yes, I'll stay married to you. Yes, I'll build this life with you. Yes to all of it, Colton Reeves. This time when he kissed her, it felt like a new beginning. The old marriage, born of necessity and circumstance, was being replaced by something chosen and wanted. The ghost of Catherine, which had haunted these halls for so long, was finally laid to rest, making room for something new. Downstairs they found Margaret setting out leftover stew and fresh bread. She took one look at their faces and smiled knowingly. About time you two figured it out, she said. I was starting to think you'd dance around each other until you were both old and gray. You knew? Evelyn asked, embarrassed. I've got eyes, haven't I? I saw it happening weeks ago, even if you two were too stubborn to notice. She ladled stew into bowls. Now sit down and eat. You've had a long day and tomorrow will come early. They ate together in the warm kitchen, talking about the hearing and the community's support, making plans for the days ahead. It felt so natural, so right, that Evelyn had to keep reminding herself that just a few weeks ago she'd been alone and desperate at a stagecoach station, convinced her life was over. What will you do about Calder? Margaret asked Colton. He won't let this go quietly. I know, but he's shown his hand now. The community knows what he's willing to do to get what he wants, and they don't like it. That gives us leverage. He pushed his empty bowl away. I'm going to ride into town tomorrow and file a formal complaint with the territorial marshal. Calder's harassment has crossed too many lines. Will that stop him? Evelyn asked. Probably not, but it will slow him down and put him on notice that I'm willing to fight back legally, not just accept his bullying. Be careful, Margaret warned. Cornered animals are the most dangerous. I will be. He looked at Evelyn. I'd like you to come with me tomorrow. We should present a united front, and I think people need to see us together as husband and wife. The phrase sent a flutter through Evelyn's stomach. I'd be honored. After Margaret left for her small cottage behind the bunkhouse, Evelyn and Colton lingered in the kitchen, neither quite ready to end the day. I suppose we should talk about sleeping arrangements, Colton said, his ears reddening slightly. Now that the marriage is... that is, we're really... married? Evelyn supplied, amused by his discomfort. Yes, we should discuss it. I don't want to pressure you into anything you're not ready for. We can continue as we have been, with separate rooms until you feel comfortable. Colton. She placed her hand over his, stilling his nervous fidgeting. We're husband and wife. I think it's time we acted like it, don't you? His eyes darkened with something that made heat pool in Evelyn's stomach. Are you sure? I'm sure. And she was. This man had proven himself worthy of her trust 100 times over. He'd given her a home, a family, a purpose. He'd defended her, valued her, chosen her. Whatever nervousness she felt was overshadowed by the certainty that this was right. Then I'll move my things into Catherine's room, into our room, he corrected himself. Tomorrow, while you're getting ready for town. Our room, Evelyn repeated, trying out the words. They felt good. True. She helped him clean up from supper, their movements synchronized from weeks of working side by side. When everything was put away and the lamps were dimmed, They climbed the stairs together. At the door to what had been Catherine's room, Colton paused. I want you to know, this room, it's yours now, ours. If you want to change anything, redecorate, make it different, I'd like that, Evelyn said. Not to erase Catherine's memory, but to make it reflect our life together. I think she'd approve. Catherine wanted the people she loved to be happy. She'd be glad her children have a mother who cares for them, and that I've found a partner who fits this life. They stood in the hallway, the house quiet around them, except for the settling creaks of old wood and the distant call of an owl. Good night, Colton, Evelyn said softly. Good night, Evelyn. He lifted her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles with old-fashioned courtliness. Sleep well. She slipped into her room, not Catherine's room anymore, but hers, soon to be theirs, and changed into her nightgown with trembling hands. Everything was changing so fast. Just this morning, she'd still been pretending to be a wife. Now she was one in truth, with all the joy and terror that implied. She lay in bed, watching moonlight paint silver patterns on the ceiling, and thought about the journey that had brought her here. Thomas's death, Margaret Hart's cruelty, the desperate journey west. Meeting Colton at the stagecoach station, the hasty wedding, the slow building of trust and affection, the hearing. And now this, a real marriage, a real family, a real future. She'd thought her life was over when Thomas died. Instead, it had just been waiting to begin. The next morning dawned clear and bright, promising another scorching July day. Evelyn woke to find Colton already gone. She could hear him moving around in his office downstairs. She dressed carefully in her best dress, a dark blue calico that brought out her eyes, and pinned her hair up with more care than usual. If they were presenting themselves to the town as a united couple, she wanted to look the part. Downstairs, she found Margaret already cooking breakfast and humming tunelessly. You look happy, Evelyn observed, tying on her apron. I am happy. This house has been too sad for too long. It's good to see life coming back into it. Margaret cracked eggs into the pan with practiced efficiency. Colton's moving his things into your room today. How did you, Like I said, I've got eyes and ears. These walls aren't as thick as you think. Margaret shot her a knowing look. But don't worry, I'm happy about it. You two deserve some joy after everything you've been through. The children thundered down the stairs moments later, James already talking a mile a minute about a dream he'd had involving horses and flying. Nora followed more sedately, but Evelyn noticed she was wearing her best dress too. Are you coming to town with us? Evelyn asked. Papa said I could, if I promised to behave and not wander off. Nora set the table with careful precision. I want people to see that we're a real family. We are a real family, sweetheart. I know, but I want everyone else to know it too. Colton appeared in the doorway, dressed in his good suit, his hair still damp from washing. He'd even trimmed his beard, and Evelyn's breath caught at how handsome he looked. Ready? He asked. Almost. Let us finish breakfast first, unless you want to arrive in town with your stomach growling. He smiled, that rare, full smile that transformed his whole face. Fair point. They ate together, a family around a table, and Evelyn felt such contentment that it almost frightened her. This much happiness felt fragile, like something that could shatter if she wasn't careful. But she was learning that happiness didn't have to be fragile. Built on a foundation of trust and choice and hard work, it could be surprisingly resilient. The ride to Plum Creek took 2 hours, with James keeping up a constant stream of chatter and Nora occasionally contributing more thoughtful observations. Colton drove with easy competence, and every so often his hand would brush against Evelyn's in what she was learning to recognize as deliberate touches. When they reached town, word of their arrival seemed to spread instantly. People emerged from shops and homes to watch them pass, some calling out greetings, others simply staring. Evelyn kept her head high, her hand resting on Colton's arm as they walked into the marshal's office. Marshal Tom Brady was a grizzled man in his 50s with sharp eyes and a reputation for fairness. He stood when they entered, his expression neutral. Colton? Mrs. Reeves, what brings you in today? I want to file a formal complaint against Silas Calder, Colton said, for harassment, intimidation, and abuse of legal processes. The marshal sighed and pulled out a form. Tell me everything. For the next hour, Colton detailed Calder's actions, the constant challenges to his water rights, the attempts to poach his ranch hands, the manipulation of Judge Whitmore to question his marriage. Evelyn added her own testimony about the invasive questioning and public humiliation at the hearing. It's clear he's trying to force me off my land or into selling, Colton concluded, and he's willing to use any means necessary. Marshal Brady tapped his pen against the desk. I'll be honest with you, Colton. Calder has powerful friends in the territory. Filing this complaint might make things worse before they get better. I understand that, but I can't just let him continue unchecked. He needs to know there are consequences for his actions. All right, I'll file the complaint and send a copy to the territorial governor. But watch your back. Men like Calder don't like being challenged. They left the marshal's office feeling both vindicated and uneasy. As they walked back toward the wagon, they passed the general store, and Evelyn paused. Could we go in? She asked. I'd like to pick up a few things for the house. Inside the store, Mrs. Patterson, the owner's wife, greeted them warmly. Mrs. Reeves, it's so good to see you. The whole town's been talking about yesterday's hearing. I'm sure they have, Evelyn said diplomatically. Well, I want you to know, most folks think you and Colton did the right thing, standing up to Silas Calder like that. That man's been a bully for too long. She leaned in conspiratorially. Between you and me, his poor daughter is probably relieved. She never wanted to marry Colton anyway. She's sweet on the banker's son. While Evelyn browsed the store's limited selection of fabrics and household goods, more townspeople came in to offer their congratulations and support. It became clear that yesterday's hearing had done more than just validate their marriage. It had established them as respected members of the community. People admire courage, Colton murmured to her as they loaded their purchases into the wagon. You showed them plenty of it yesterday. We showed them, Evelyn corrected. This is a partnership, remember? His hand found hers, squeezing gently. I remember. They were preparing to leave when a commotion erupted down the street. Evelyn turned to see Silas Calder striding toward them, his face flushed with rage. Reeves, he shouted. How dare you file a complaint against me? Colton stepped in front of Evelyn and the children, his posture protective. I filed a legitimate complaint about your harassment. If you have a problem with that, take it up with the marshal. You think you've won, don't you? You think because you fooled a judge and a bunch of simple-minded townsfolk, you're safe? Calder's voice dripped with venom. This isn't over. I'll see you ruined, Reeves. I'll take everything you have. You're welcome to try. Colton's voice was dangerously calm. But I warn you, Calder. I built my ranch from nothing once. I can do it again. Can you say the same? You arrogant... Calder lunged forward, but Marshal Brady appeared, grabbing his arm. That's enough, Silas. You're making threats in front of witnesses. That's not going to help your case. My case? Calder whirled on the marshal. What about his complaint? It's baseless, nothing but lies. That'll be for the territorial authorities to decide. Right now, I'm suggesting you go home and cool off before you do something you'll regret. Calder jerked his arm free, his eyes burning with fury as he looked at Evelyn. You think you're so clever, don't you? Coming in here with your helpless widow act, manipulating everyone. But I know what you really are, a fortune hunter who saw an opportunity and took it. Before Colton could respond, Evelyn stepped forward. She'd spent too long being diminished by Margaret Hart's cutting remarks, too long feeling like she had to accept whatever judgment others cast on her. Mr. Calder, she said, her voice clear and steady, I don't care what you think of me, but I do care about my family. You tried to destroy us yesterday and failed. You're trying to intimidate us today, and it won't work. Whatever you do next, you'll find we're stronger together than you ever imagined. Brave words from a desperate woman. Not desperate anymore. I have everything I need right here. She gestured to Colton and the children. You, on the other hand, seem quite desperate. So desperate you're willing to harass a family and abuse the legal system. I pity you, Mr. Calder. I truly do. Calder's face went purple. For a moment, Evelyn thought he might actually strike her. But Colton moved closer, his presence a silent warning, and the moment passed. This isn't over, Calder hissed one more time, then stalked away. The street had gone silent, everyone watching the confrontation. Then Mrs. Patterson began to clap, and others joined in. Within moments, the entire street was applauding. "Well done, Mrs. Reeves," Marshal Brady said quietly. "That took guts." Evelyn's hands were shaking, but she managed a smile. "I've discovered I have more of those than I thought." On the ride home, Colton was quiet, his jaw tight. "Are you angry?" Evelyn finally asked. "Angry? No." "Terrified?" "Yes." Evelyn, confronting Calder like that was incredibly brave, but it was also dangerous. He's not a man who forgives perceived insults. "I know, but I couldn't let him keep talking about us that way, about me that way. We've done nothing wrong." "No, we haven't. But that doesn't mean he won't try to hurt us anyway." He glanced at her, his expression softening. "Though I admit, watching you stand up to him was magnificent. You reminded me of a queen defending her kingdom." "Some kingdom. A ranch house and 2 children and an overworked husband. It's our kingdom, though. Worth defending." That night, after the children were asleep and the house was quiet, Colton carried his belongings into what was now truly their bedroom. Evelyn had spent the afternoon making small changes, removing some of Catherine's more personal items, adding touches that felt more like her own. The room was becoming a reflection of both women, a blending of past and present. "This feels strange," Colton admitted, setting his trunk in the corner. "I haven't slept in this room since Catherine died." "We can use a different room, if you'd prefer." "No, this is right. It's just different." He looked around at the changes she'd made. "Better, though. More like a room for living instead of a shrine to the past." They prepared for bed awkwardly, both hyper-aware of the other's presence. When they finally lay down together, a careful distance between them, the silence felt heavy with unspoken expectations. "I'm nervous," Evelyn admitted finally. "So am I," Colton said, and she heard the relief in his voice that she'd spoken first. "This is a second chance for both of us. I don't want to waste it." "Neither do I." She turned to face him in the darkness. "But I think we're already doing everything right. Building slowly, choosing each other every day. That's worth more than rushing into something we're not ready for." He reached out and pulled her close, and she settled against his chest with a sigh of contentment. His heart beat steady beneath her ear, strong and reliable. "We have time," he murmured into her hair. "All the time in the world to figure this out." They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's arms, and Evelyn dreamed of the future they were building together, imperfect and earned and absolutely theirs. The next week passed in a haze of domesticity and growing intimacy. Colton and Evelyn learned the rhythms of sharing a bed, of waking together, of the small intimacies of married life. They learned each other's habits and preferences, adjusted to each other's presence, and slowly, carefully, built something neither had expected to find: genuine partnership and affection. The children blossomed under the security of having 2 parents who were clearly committed to each other and to them. James's nightmares became less frequent. Nora began to laugh more, the hard shell she'd built around herself finally cracking open. One evening, as they all sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and reds, Nora spoke up. "Evelyn, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you think Mama would have liked you?" It was a question Evelyn had wondered about herself. Would Catherine have approved of the woman who now slept in her bed, raised her children, loved her husband? "I'd like to think so," she said carefully. "Your mama wanted your papa and you children to be happy. I think she'd be glad we found each other, even if it happened in an unconventional way." "I think she would have liked you," Nora said decidedly. "You're strong like she wasn't. You can handle this life. She would have appreciated that." Colton's arm came around Evelyn's shoulders, pulling her close. "Your mama would have loved her," he said. "Just like we do." The simple declaration made Evelyn's eyes sting with tears. Love. They loved her. This family she'd stumbled into through desperation, and luck had somehow become hers, and they loved her. "I love you too," she whispered. "All of you. More than I ever imagined possible." As the last light faded from the sky and the first stars began to appear, Evelyn thought about how far she'd come. From nobody at a stagecoach station to somebody, to wife, mother, partner, protector. She'd found her place not by chance, but by choosing it, by fighting for it, by proving day after day that she belonged. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Calder wasn't finished with them, and frontier life was never easy. But tonight, surrounded by her family on the porch of their home, Evelyn felt a peace she'd never known. She'd found what she'd been searching for without even knowing she was looking. Not just a home or security or purpose, but love in all its messy, complicated, beautiful forms. And it was more than enough. It was everything. 3 months had passed since the hearing, and autumn was beginning to paint the Nebraska prairie in shades of amber and rust. The oppressive heat of summer had given way to crisp mornings and comfortable afternoons, and the CR Ranch had settled into a rhythm that felt almost too peaceful to last. Evelyn should have known better than to trust the quiet. She was in the kitchen preserving the last of the season's tomatoes when one of the ranch hands, a young man named Tom Miller, burst through the door, his face pale with urgency. "Mrs. Reeves, you need to come quick. There's been an accident." Her heart stopped. "The children?" "No, ma'am. They're fine, playing in the barn with old Samuel watching them. It's Mr. Reeves. His horse threw him checking the north fence line. We got him back to the house, but he's hurt bad." Evelyn's training from months of frontier living kicked in instantly. She wiped her hands on her apron and grabbed the medical kit Margaret had taught her to keep stocked. "Where is he?" "In your bedroom. Doc Patterson's been sent for, but he's out at the Henderson place delivering a baby. Could be hours before he gets here." She took the stairs 2 at a time, her mind racing through everything Margaret had taught her about treating injuries. When she pushed open the bedroom door, she found Colton lying on their bed, his face gray with pain. His shirt had been cut away, revealing an angry bruise blooming across his ribs. His left arm hung at an unnatural angle. "It's not as bad as it looks," he said through gritted teeth, trying to sit up. "Don't you dare move." She set the medical kit on the bedside table with shaking hands. "Tom, get me hot water and clean towels, and send someone to fetch Margaret." As Tom ran to do her bidding, Evelyn carefully examined Colton's injuries. She'd seen Margaret set broken bones before, had even assisted once when a ranch hand had broken his wrist. But this was different. This was Colton, her husband, and the thought of causing him more pain made her stomach clench. "Talk to me," she said, keeping her voice steady. "What happened?" "Rabbit spooked thunder. Stupid accident." He winced as she gently probed his ribs. "Pretty sure the arm's broken. Ribs might just be bruised." "Your arm is definitely broken." She could see the fracture, feel the misalignment beneath her careful fingers. "I'm going to have to set it before the doctor arrives. The longer we wait, the worse it'll be." His eyes met hers, trust and pain warring in their gray depths. "Can you do it?" "I have to." She took a deep breath, calling on reserves of strength she hadn't known she possessed. "This is going to hurt." "I know." Margaret arrived just as Evelyn was gathering what she needed. The older woman took one look at the situation and rolled up her sleeves. "Good, you're not waiting for Patterson. Man's probably drunk anyway." She moved to Colton's other side. "I'll hold him steady. You set the bone. You've got steadier hands than me." Evelyn's hands were trembling, but she nodded. She'd watched this done, had studied the medical manual Colton kept in his office. Theory was one thing. Practice, especially on someone she loved, was entirely different. "Colton, I need you to look at me," she said softly. When his eyes locked on hers, she continued, "I'm going to count to 3, and then I'm going to pull and align the bone. It's going to hurt like hell, but it'll be fast. Can you do this?" "With you? I can do anything." The simple faith in his words gave her courage. She positioned her hands carefully, Margaret bracing Colton's shoulder. 1. She didn't wait for 3. With one smooth, firm motion, she pulled and manipulated the bone back into alignment. Colton's scream of pain tore through her heart, but she forced herself to stay focused. Securing the splint, Margaret handed her with steady, sure movements. When it was done, Colton lay back against the pillows, his face slick with sweat, but his breathing beginning to steady. "You didn't count to 3, he said weakly. "If I had, you would have tensed up. This way was faster." She smoothed his hair back from his forehead with a tenderness that made Margaret discreetly look away. "The worst is over. Your hands aren't shaking anymore. They will be later. Right now you need me steady." Margaret helped her bind Colton's ribs and get him settled more comfortably. By the time Doc Patterson arrived 3 hours later, slightly tipsy but functional, There was little left for him to do but approve Evelyn's work. "Fine job, Mrs. Reeves," he said, examining the splint. "Couldn't have done better myself. Maybe better, truth be told, since my hands aren't as steady as they used to be." He pulled a bottle from his bag. "Laudanum for the pain, small doses only, and watch for fever." After the doctor left, Evelyn sat beside the bed while Colton drifted in and out of laudanum-induced sleep. The children had been told about the accident and allowed to see their father briefly, but she'd sent them back downstairs with Margaret, promising they could visit again in the morning. Now, in the quiet of their room, the reality of what could have happened crashed over her. Colton could have been killed, a different fall, a worse injury, and she could have lost him just as she'd lost Thomas. "I can hear you thinking," Colton murmured, his eyes still closed. "You should be sleeping." "Hard to sleep when my wife is radiating anxiety like a furnace radiates heat." He opened his eyes, focusing on her with effort. "I'm going to be fine, Evelyn." "You could have died." "But I didn't. Thanks to Thunder having good sense not to roll on me, and to you having the courage to set my arm." He reached for her hand with his good one. "You were magnificent. Terrified, but magnificent. I was so scared. When Tom came running in, I thought—" Her voice broke. "I thought I'd lost you." "You haven't. I'm too stubborn to die from a simple fall." He squeezed her hand. "But I need you to understand something. This life, out here on the frontier, it's dangerous. Accidents happen. People get hurt. Sometimes they die. That's the reality we live with. I know that." "Do you? Because you look like you're already grieving me, and I'm right here, very much alive." She wiped at her eyes angrily. "I can't lose you, Colton. I can't lose this family. Not now. Not when I've finally found where I belong." "Then don't waste the time we have worrying about time we might not get." He tugged her hand gently. "Come here. Lie down next to me. I'll hurt you. You'll hurt me more by staying over there looking miserable." Carefully, so carefully, she stretched out beside him on the bed, her head on his shoulder. His good arm came around her, holding her close. "Better?" he asked. "Better?" She listened to his heartbeat, steady and strong beneath her ear. "Colton, I love you. I don't think I've said it plainly enough. Not the way you deserve to hear it. You say it every day. In the way you care for the children, manage the house, stand beside me through everything. But it's nice to hear the words, too." "I love you, Sam," she repeated. "Not because you gave me a home or security or purpose, though you did. I love you because you're good and honest and strong. Because you make me want to be braver than I am. Because when I look at our life together, I can't imagine being anywhere else." "I love you too," he said softly. "More than I thought I could love anyone again. You've brought light back into this house, into my life. You've given my children a mother and given me a true partner. I don't know what I did to deserve you, but I'm grateful every day that you stepped off that stagecoach." They lay together in the gathering darkness, and Evelyn felt the peace that came from knowing she was exactly where she was meant to be. The next weeks tested that peace severely. Colton's injuries meant he couldn't perform his usual duties around the ranch, and the burden of managing everything fell to Evelyn and the ranch hands. She rose before dawn each day, checking on the livestock, overseeing repairs, making decisions about which fields to harvest first. The work was exhausting and never-ending, but she refused to let the ranch suffer because its owner was temporarily incapacitated. Margaret watched her with a mixture of approval and concern. "You're running yourself ragged," she said one evening as Evelyn dragged herself into the kitchen after a 14-hour day. "The work needs doing." "The work will always need doing. That's the nature of ranch life. But you need to pace yourself, girl, or you'll be the next one laid up." "I can rest when Colton's healed." "Stubborn as he is, you are." Margaret pushed a plate of food toward her. "Eat. You're no good to anyone if you collapse." Evelyn ate mechanically, too tired to taste the food. Upstairs, she could hear James laughing at something Colton had said. The sound made her smile despite her exhaustion. Colton might be injured, but he was healing well, and his spirits remained good. She was just finishing her meal when Tom Miller appeared in the doorway again, and the expression on his face made her stomach drop. "Not another accident," she said. "No, ma'am, but we got trouble. Silas Calder's men are cutting our north fence line. They're driving cattle onto our land, claiming we moved the boundary markers." Evelyn was on her feet instantly. How many men? 6 that we can see. They're armed. So are we. She turned to Margaret. Stay with the children and Colton. Don't let him try to get up no matter what he says. Where are you going? To defend what's ours. She strapped on Colton's gun belt, the weight unfamiliar but not unwelcome. Margaret had taught her to shoot months ago, insisting that every frontier woman needed to know how to protect herself. Evelyn had never imagined she'd need the skill. Tom and 3 other ranch hands were waiting by the barn, all armed and grim-faced. Mrs. Reeves, maybe we should send for the marshal. By the time he arrives from Plum Creek, Calder's men could have half our herd on his land, and the fence destroyed. We stop this now. She swung up onto her horse with more confidence than she felt. Let's go. The ride to the north fence line took 20 minutes that felt like hours. As they approached, Evelyn could see exactly what Tom had described. 6 men systematically destroying the fence while cattle milled nervously nearby. She recognized the man in charge, Wade Tucker, Calder's foreman, a mean-spirited bully who'd been part of Calder's entourage at the hearing. That's far enough, she called out, reining in her horse at a safe distance. You're destroying private property and trespassing on CR land. Tucker looked up with a smirk. Mrs. Reeves, where's your husband? Too scared to defend his own property. My husband is recovering from an injury, but I'm here, and I'm telling you to stop what you're doing and leave. Now. Or what? You'll shoot me? Tucker laughed. Mr. Calder says these boundary markers were moved illegally. We're just correcting the error. Those markers haven't been moved since my husband's father established them 30 years ago. You know that, and Calder knows that. This is harassment, pure and simple. Prove it. Evelyn's hand moved to the gun at her hip. I don't have to prove anything. This is our land, legally surveyed and registered. You're the ones who need to leave. Tucker's smile faded. You won't shoot me, Mrs. Reeves. You're a lady. Ladies don't pull triggers. You'd be surprised what ladies do when their homes are threatened. She drew the gun with steady hands, pointing it directly at Tucker. I've set broken bones, birthed calves, and faced down a territorial judge. Shooting a man who's destroying my property doesn't even make the list of hardest things I've done this year. For the first time, Tucker looked uncertain. Behind her, Evelyn heard her ranch hands readying their own weapons. You're outnumbered 6-5, Tucker said, but his voice lacked conviction. Maybe, but I'm fighting for my home and my family. What are you fighting for? Silas Calder's greed? She kept the gun steady. Last chance, Tucker. Leave now, or I send Tom here to fetch the marshal, and we press charges for destruction of property, trespassing, and theft. Mr. Calder's already on thin ice with the territorial authorities. How do you think they'll react to this? Tucker's jaw worked as he considered his options. Finally, he spat in the dirt. Fine. We'll leave. But Mr. Calder ain't going to like this. Mr. Calder can take his complaints to the proper authorities. If he has a legitimate claim to this land, he can file it legally. Otherwise, he can stay on his side of the fence and leave us alone. She kept her gun drawn until Tucker and his men had mounted their horses and ridden away. Only then did her hands start to shake. You were incredible, Mrs. Reeves, Tom said with open admiration. I ain't never seen anyone face down Wade Tucker like that. I was terrified the entire time. She holstered the gun with trembling fingers. But we couldn't let them destroy our fence and steal our cattle. Mr. Reeves is going to be proud when he hears about this. Evelyn looked at the damaged fence, calculating the work it would take to repair. He's going to be furious that I put myself in danger. But we can worry about that later. Right now, we need to fix this fence before we lose any cattle. They worked into the night, repairing the damage and reinforcing the fence. By the time Evelyn rode back to the house, she was so exhausted she could barely stay in the saddle. She found Colton waiting in the kitchen, his face tight with worry and anger. You should be in bed, she said, and you should have woken me before you rode out to confront armed men. His voice was quiet, but she could hear the fury beneath it. What were you thinking? I was thinking that someone needed to protect our ranch, and you were in no condition to do it. She pulled off her gloves and set them on the table. Calder's men were destroying our fence and trying to steal our cattle. Was I supposed to just let them? You were supposed to send for the marshal. By the time he arrived, the damage would have been done. She met his eyes steadily. I did what needed to be done, Colton. The same thing you would have done if you'd been able. I'm a man. It's different. No, it's not. I'm your wife and your partner. That means when you can't protect what's ours, I step up. That's what partnership means. He stared at her for a long moment, frustration and pride warring on his face. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed. God help me. I married a woman as stubborn as I am. He pulled her close with his good arm. You scared 10 years off my life, Evelyn Reeves, but you also proved that I was right about you from the start. Right about what? That you're strong enough for this life, strong enough for this family. He kissed her forehead. I'm proud of you, terrified and proud in equal measure. Calder's not going to stop, she said quietly. This was just another attempt to push us out. I know, but we're not going anywhere. His expression hardened. And after tonight, he's going to learn that attacking the CR ranch means dealing with both of us. The next morning, Colton insisted on riding into Plum Creek despite Evelyn's protests. His arm was still in a splint, his ribs still tender, but his determination was absolute. We're going to end this, he said, once and for all. They brought Tom Miller and 2 other ranch hands as witnesses, along with detailed documentation of every incident of harassment, intimidation, and property damage Calder had orchestrated over the past months. Marshal Brady listened to their account with growing concern. That's the 3rd complaint against Calder this month, he said heavily. And the territorial governor's been asking questions about his land acquisitions. Seems a lot of his neighbors have sold out cheap after experiencing similar harassment. Can you do anything about it? Evelyn asked. I can, and I will. I'm going out to Calder's place today with a warrant. We'll search for evidence of the stolen cattle, and I'll be placing him under investigation for criminal harassment. He looked at Colton seriously. This is going to get worse before it gets better. Calder won't take kindly to being investigated. Let it get worse, Colton said flatly. I'm done being patient with that man. But it wasn't Calder who showed up at the CR ranch 2 days later. It was his daughter, Melissa, looking pale and frightened. Evelyn found her on the porch, twisting her hands nervously. Mrs. Reeves, I need to speak with you and Mr. Reeves. Please. It's important. They brought her into the kitchen, and Margaret made tea while Melissa gathered her courage. My father doesn't know I'm here, she said finally. He'd be furious if he found out. But I can't stay silent anymore. What he's doing to you, it's wrong. It's always been wrong. Why are you telling us this? Colton asked. Because the marshal came with a warrant, and my father is planning something terrible. He's not going to stop. He's talking about burning you out, making it look like an accident. I heard him talking to Wade Tucker about it last night. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I know my father is awful. I know he's hurt people trying to get what he wants, but I can't let him commit murder. I won't. Evelyn's blood ran cold. He's planning to burn down our house? Or the barn, somewhere that would force you to leave, to give up. He's obsessed with getting your water rights and your land. He says it's the principle of the thing now, that you've made him look like a fool and he won't stand for it. Colton stood, his face hard as granite. When is he planning this? I don't know. Soon. Maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow. That's why I came as soon as I could. Melissa looked at them with desperate eyes. I'm so sorry. I should have said something sooner, but he's my father, and I was scared. You're saying something now, Evelyn said gently. That takes courage. What will you do? We'll be ready, Colton said grimly, and we'll make sure the marshal knows about these threats. Your father has gone too far. After Melissa left, promising to send word if she learned anything specific, Evelyn and Colton prepared for the worst. They moved the children to Margaret's cottage for safety. They armed the ranch hands and set up watches around the property. They sent word to Marshal Brady about Calder's threats. And then they waited. The attack came 2 nights later, in the darkest hours before dawn. Evelyn woke to the smell of smoke and Colton's urgent voice. Fire! The barn's on fire! They rushed outside to find flames already climbing the barn walls, orange and hungry in the darkness. The ranch hands were running with buckets from the pump, but it was clear the fire had been set with accelerant. It was spreading too fast for it to be accidental. Get the horses out, Colton shouted, running toward the barn despite his injuries. Evelyn grabbed buckets and joined the water brigade, her heart pounding with terror and rage. This was their home, their livelihood. Calder was trying to destroy everything they'd built. Through the smoke and chaos, she saw movement at the edge of the property, riders fleeing into the darkness. Wade Tucker and several of Calder's men, she was certain of it. "Tom," she called. "Take 2 men and ride after them. Don't let them escape." Tom didn't hesitate, galloping off in pursuit, while Evelyn turned back to fighting the fire. It took 3 hours to get the blaze under control. The barn was a total loss, reduced to smoking ruins. But they'd saved the horses, and the fire hadn't spread to any other buildings. In the grim light of dawn, Evelyn surveyed the damage with a mixture of grief and fury. Colton stood beside her, his good arm around her shoulders. His face was streaked with soot, and she knew she must look the same. "We'll rebuild," he said quietly. "We shouldn't have to. Calder needs to be stopped." "He will be." Tom returned an hour later with Wade Tucker in custody, the man's hands bound and his face defiant. "We caught him half a mile from here, reeking of kerosene. He had 2 others with him, but they got away." Marshal Brady arrived within the hour, brought by one of the ranch hands Evelyn had sent to town. He took one look at the destroyed barn and Tucker's guilty expression and immediately placed the foreman under arrest. "Where's Calder?" he demanded of Tucker. "I ain't saying nothing." "You'll say plenty once you're facing 20 years in territorial prison for arson, or you can tell me now and maybe get some leniency." Tucker's resolve crumbled. "He's at his ranch, planning to claim he was home all night, that I acted on my own." "We'll see about that." The marshal rode out to Calder's ranch with a posse, and Evelyn and Colton followed despite their exhaustion. They wanted to see this through to the end. They found Silas Calder in his study, looking entirely too calm for a man whose hired thugs had just been caught committing arson. But his composure cracked when Marshal Brady informed him he was under arrest. "This is outrageous," Calder blustered. "I've done nothing wrong." "Your foreman confessed to everything, including that you ordered the fire. We have witnesses who saw your men fleeing the scene, and I have testimony from your daughter about your threats." The marshal produced handcuffs. "Silas Calder, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit arson, criminal harassment, attempted theft, and destruction of property." "You can't do this. I have friends in the territorial government." "Had friends," the marshal corrected. "Turns out the governor doesn't look kindly on men who terrorize their neighbors. He's been wanting an excuse to deal with you for years. You just gave it to him." As Calder was led away in chains, still protesting his innocence, Evelyn felt a weight lift from her shoulders. It was over. Finally, over. The ride back to the ranch was quiet, both of them processing everything that had happened. "We lost the barn," Colton said finally. "We can rebuild a barn. We still have each other, the children, the ranch. That's what matters. It's going to be expensive, set us back financially. Then we'll economize, we'll work harder, we'll manage." She looked at him firmly. "We've survived everything else Calder threw at us. We'll survive this too." He pulled his horse close enough to reach for her hand. "I don't know what I did to deserve you, Evelyn Reeves, but I thank God every day that you were desperate enough to marry me." "I wasn't desperate," she said with a smile. "I was smart. I saw a good man offering me a chance at a real life, and I took it. Best decision I ever made, asking you to marry me." "Second best," she corrected. "The best decision was choosing to make it a real marriage instead of just an arrangement." True enough. When they arrived home, they found the children waiting anxiously on the porch of Margaret's cottage. James ran to them immediately, throwing his arms around Evelyn's waist. "Is it over? Is the bad man gone?" "He's gone, sweetheart. He can't hurt us anymore." Nora stood back, trying to maintain her composure, but Evelyn could see the relief in her eyes. "The barn's really destroyed?" "I'm afraid so, but barns can be rebuilt. People can't. Everyone is safe, and that's what matters." "When can we go home?" "Right now, if you'd like." They walked back to the main house together, a family that had been tested by fire, literally, and had emerged stronger. The destroyed barn was a harsh reminder of what they'd faced, but it was also proof that they'd survived. They'd won. Over the following weeks, news filtered in about Silas Calder's fate. Wade Tucker had turned state's evidence in exchange for a lighter sentence, providing detailed testimony about all of Calder's illegal activities. The territorial governor had launched a full investigation, and it quickly became clear that Calder had been systematically harassing and defrauding his neighbors for years. He was sentenced to 15 years in territorial prison. His ranch and holdings were seized to pay restitution to his victims. And Melissa Calder, finally free of her father's control, married the banker's son and moved to Omaha, sending Evelyn a heartfelt letter of thanks for treating her with kindness when no one else had. The CR Ranch's barn was rebuilt by late October, with help from neighbors who'd heard what happened and wanted to show their support. It was larger than the original, with better ventilation and sturdier construction. Colton grumbled about the cost, but Evelyn saw the pride in his eyes every time he looked at it. His arm healed slowly but well, and by November he was back to full duties around the ranch. The first snow fell the week before Thanksgiving, turning the prairie into a white wonderland that made James shriek with delight and even drew a smile from serious Nora. On Thanksgiving Day, they gathered around the table, Colton, Evelyn, the children, and Margaret, who'd become as much family as employee. The food was simple but abundant: roasted chicken, potatoes, vegetables from the root cellar, fresh bread, and pie made from preserved berries. "What are we thankful for?" Evelyn asked, continuing a tradition her mother had started long ago. "I'm thankful the bad man is gone and we're safe," James said immediately. "I'm thankful for our new barn," Nora added, "and for Mama teaching me to make pie." The word Mama still made Evelyn's heart swell every time she heard it. She looked at Colton, waiting for his answer. "I'm thankful for second chances," he said, his eyes on her. "For brave women who step off stagecoaches and change everything. For children who teach me every day what really matters. For this life we've built together." "I'm thankful for all of that too," Evelyn said softly. "But most of all, I'm thankful for finding home. Not just a house, but a place where I belong. A family that chose me as much as I chose them." "To family," Margaret said, raising her glass. "To the family we're born into and the family we make." They echoed the toast, and as Evelyn looked around the table at these people who'd become her whole world, she thought about the journey that had brought her here, the grief and loss, the desperate loneliness at that stagecoach station, the terrifying leap of faith that was marrying a stranger. If someone had told her 8 months ago that she'd be sitting here now, wife, mother, rancher, survivor, she never would have believed them. But life had a way of surprising you, of taking you places you never imagined you could go. After dinner, while Margaret cleaned up and the children played in the other room, Evelyn and Colton stood on the porch watching the snow fall. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "Agreeing to marry me that day?" "Never. Not once." She leaned against him, and his arm came around her automatically. "Do you?" "God, no. Marrying you was the smartest thing I've ever done, even if it did take me a while to realize it. We were both slow to understand what we had. But we got there eventually. That's what matters." They stood in comfortable silence, watching their breath mist in the cold air. In the house behind them, they could hear James's laughter and Nora's patient instruction as she taught him a new game. "I want to give you something," Colton said suddenly. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. "I should have done this months ago, but I'm doing it now." Inside the box was a ring, not Catherine's wedding band, but something new. A simple gold band with a small sapphire that matched Evelyn's eyes. "I want you to have your own ring," he said. "Catherine's ring was right for the arrangement we started with. But this—" He took her hand. "This is for the real marriage we have now, if you'll accept it." Evelyn's eyes filled with tears as he slid the new ring onto her finger beside Catherine's band. "It's beautiful. Not as beautiful as you. Not as beautiful as the life we've built." He kissed her gently. "I love you, Evelyn. Not because I need you or because it's convenient. I love you because you're brave and strong and kind. Because you make me want to be better. Because every day with you feels like a gift I don't deserve." "You deserve it," she whispered. "You deserve all of it. And I love you too, Colton Reeves, more than I ever thought I could love anyone." They kissed as snow fell around them, and Evelyn felt peace settle into her bones. This was home. This was family. This was love in its truest, hardest won, most beautiful form. Inside, James called for them, wanting to show them something he'd built with his blocks. They went in together, hand in hand, ready to face whatever came next, because they'd learned the most important lesson. Together, they could survive anything. Together, they could build something lasting and real. Together, they were home. The winter passed in a blur of cozy evenings by the fire, children's laughter, and the quiet contentment of a family that had finally found its rhythm. Spring brought new calves and the hard work of branding and fence repair. Summer brought long days of haying and the joy of watching the ranch thrive under their combined stewardship. And one August morning, exactly 1 year after Evelyn had stepped off that stagecoach in Fort McPherson, she woke with a secret that would change everything once more. She waited until the children had gone outside to play, and Margaret had left for town before telling Colton. They were in the kitchen, and he was reviewing the ranch accounts while she kneaded bread dough. "Colton," she said, her heart pounding, "I have something to tell you." He looked up, immediately attentive to the nervousness in her voice. "What is it? What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. At least, I don't think so. I hope not." She took a deep breath. "I'm pregnant." For a moment, he just stared at her. Then he was across the kitchen, pulling her into his arms despite the flour on her hands. "Are you sure?" His voice was choked with emotion. "As sure as I can be. Margaret noticed the signs before I did and confronted me about it yesterday. She thinks I'm about 3 months along." 3 months. He pulled back to look at her, his eyes searching her face. "And you're all right? You feel well?" "I feel wonderful. A little tired, but wonderful." "A baby." He said it like he was testing the word, seeing how it felt. "Our baby." "Are you happy?" she asked, suddenly uncertain. "I know Catherine's pregnancy with James was difficult, and you were so worried." "I'm terrified," he admitted, "but I'm also happier than I have any right to be." "You're strong, Evelyn, stronger than Catherine ever was. You can handle this. We can handle this. Together." "Together," he agreed, and kissed her with a tenderness that made her eyes sting. They told the children that evening, and the reactions were everything Evelyn could have hoped for. James was thrilled at the prospect of being a big brother, immediately declaring he would teach the baby everything he knew. Nora was quieter, but when Evelyn caught her eye, the girl smiled with genuine warmth. "Another Reeves," Nora said. "That's good. We're building a dynasty." "A dynasty?" Colton laughed. "That's ambitious." "Why not? You built this ranch from almost nothing. Evelyn turned it into a real home. We survived Mr. Calder and a barn fire and everything else. Why can't we build a dynasty?" Why not indeed, Evelyn thought. They'd already built something remarkable from nothing more than desperation and determination. What was a dynasty compared to that? The pregnancy progressed smoothly, and by late autumn, Evelyn was undeniably showing. The community, which had fully accepted her as Colton's wife and the mother of his children, rallied around them once more. Women brought baby clothes and advice. Men helped with the heavier ranch work. And when her time came in late February, during a blizzard that buried the prairie under 3 feet of snow, she had Margaret and 2 neighboring women to help her through it. The labor was long and hard, but Evelyn had faced down armed men and territorial judges. She could handle bringing a baby into the world. At dawn, as the blizzard finally began to clear, a baby's cry filled the house. Colton, who'd been pacing downstairs with James and Nora, took the stairs 3 at a time. He found Evelyn propped up in bed, exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in soft blankets. Margaret stood nearby, beaming with pride. "Come meet your daughter," Evelyn said softly. A daughter. Colton approached slowly, almost reverently, and looked down at the tiny face peeking from the blankets. She had a shock of dark hair and Evelyn's delicate features, and when she opened her eyes, they were the same stormy gray as her father's. "She's perfect," he breathed. "She is." Evelyn looked up at him with tears streaming down her face. "We made her, Colton. You and me together. We made this perfect little person." He sat carefully on the edge of the bed, one arm around Evelyn and the other gently touching his daughter's tiny hand. The baby's fingers wrapped around his thumb with surprising strength. "What will we name her?" he asked. Evelyn had thought about this for months. "I'd like to name her Catherine Margaret Reeves. Catherine for the woman who came before me and gave you these amazing children. Margaret for the woman who taught me how to survive out here. If that's all right with you." Colton's eyes were wet as he nodded. "It's more than all right. It's perfect. Catherine would have loved that." They let the children come in then, James bouncing with excitement and Nora trying to maintain her dignity while clearly dying to hold her baby sister. "She's so small," James marveled, gently touching the baby's cheek. "You were this small once," Evelyn told him. "Can I hold her?" Nora asked hesitantly. "Of course you can. Come sit here." Nora settled carefully on the bed, and Evelyn placed the baby in her arms. The girl looked down at her sister with an expression of fierce protectiveness that reminded Evelyn so much of Colton it made her heart ache. "I'll take care of her," Nora said solemnly. "I'll teach her everything I know. I'll make sure she knows about Mama Catherine and Mama Evelyn. I'll make sure she knows how brave our family is." "I know you will, sweetheart." They sat together as the winter sun rose over the snow-covered prairie, a family complete and whole. 4 children now, 2 inherited, 1 born of their union. A marriage that had started as a desperate bargain and become something precious. A home built on honesty, hard work, and stubborn determination. Evelyn looked around at her family and felt such overwhelming love she could barely breathe. This was what she'd been searching for without knowing it, all those months ago when she'd stood alone at the stagecoach station. Not just shelter or security, but belonging. Purpose. Love. She'd been nobody then, discarded and hopeless. Now she was Evelyn Reeves, wife, mother, rancher, survivor. She was somebody's partner, somebody's mama, somebody's whole world. And it was more than enough. It was everything. Years would pass. More children would come. The ranch would prosper under their joint management. They would face droughts and harsh winters, good years and bad, the endless challenges of frontier life. But they would face it all together, this family built from broken pieces and desperate choices. And on quiet evenings, when the children were asleep and the house was still, Colton and Evelyn would sit on their porch and remember how it all began. A wealthy single father and an abandoned widow, both believing they'd lost their chance at happiness, finding something better than either had dreamed possible. Not a fairy tale, not a romance novel, just real, hard-won, absolutely genuine love. And that, it turned out, was the best kind of all. The end.